All right. Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me. My name is Orlando Price of the Success Center for Entrepreneurs. If you're on with us, you can utilize the submit a question so we can answer it live on Airbox. Um, Give me one moment, everyone. Please bear with me as I begin our presentation. I'm just going to need to load the presentation video into the YouTube app for Google Hangouts. Just give me one moment, everyone. Okay. Please just bear with me, everyone, as we are preparing our presentation. Just loading it in here is something new for us. Please hold for me. Man, this is the craziest. Okay, everyone, as we are booted up, I have everything set here for us to begin playing our presentation. Okay. All right. Okay, everyone. My name is Orlando Price of the Success Center for Entrepreneurs. It's my privilege and pleasure to be a part of the How to Make Money with Your Music seminar, webinar, workshop, continuing education series. I'm happy to be a part of this. I'm glad to be able to network with you guys and to, provide this useful, insightful, money-making information. Let me tell you about the Success Center for Entrepreneurs and what it is that we do. The Success Center for Entrepreneurs is a nonprofit business education provider. We offer low and no cost workshops and seminars to individuals who, most in need of the information. And it's just a great thing for us to be able to work with entrepreneurs in all different realms of business to assist them in achieving the monetary results that they want for themselves and for their businesses. In us doing this, we have an opportunity to mix and mingle and interview with leading industry experts as we ourselves participate in the very best training so that we're able to offer you guys the very best in information. So with this making money with your music online continuing education series, our goal is to provide you guys with a solid blueprint that will enable you to take your art from just being art, from just being something that you're passionate about, to being something that you're in love with and that derives consistent and growing profits and revenues for yourself, for your band, and for your brand as a whole. Fantastic. So the let's begin. We're going to jump into the Making Money with Your Music workshop series. We're going to watch about an hour of this video together, and we'll stay in communication with each other. I'm going to be emailing everyone PDFs related to what it is that we're learning. It'll just be quick action notes from this so that you guys are able to ingest it and apply it in your businesses. All right, and again, I'm Orlando Price of the Success Centers for Entrepreneurs. I'm available if you guys have any questions for me, but let's jump on in.
You don't already know about them to begin with, you're going to be floored and you're going to definitely be excited to be with us today. I'm Evie Danford. I'll be one of your hosts throughout the remainder of this course. And we also have my fantastic co-host, Chris Jennings. Chris, how are you feeling this morning?
I'm doing well, Evie. Thank you. Looking forward Jason are really well known in the music industry. And before we get started, I just want to read one quote to kind of set the stage for who these guys are, where they come from. This is a quote from Billboard magazine, and they say Churko and Fien are there will be something for everyone to learn, and you can get started to make money with your music. So I'm excited.
I'm excited too. I mean, talking to them over the last day or two, just getting to know who they are and what they do. We really do have top-notch mentors with us today. So pretty excited, and I'm definitely glad that those of you online and right band out of Chicago called Meet New.
How do you make money with music? Really, that's at the center of the whole thing. It's the question that we get the most often for our book, The Indie Band Survival Guide. And really, it's at the heart of most things. So when I think about how to make money with music, I actually think, how do I make money with most of the things that you would do? I mean, really, whether you have a multinational oil company or just a taco stand, it's the same formula, which is simply this. What you make minus what you spend is what you keep. Now, if you think about it, a lot of businesses fail by not making enough, but more than you would think fail by actually spending too much. They have income, they spend too much, they actually don't have enough cash flow.
Yes,
so let's talk about this. Let's talk about the kinds of things we can do here. What you make, these are the topics that we're going to cover here today. Things like selling your music, that's obvious, right? Licensing and royalties, which may not make as much sense if you haven't done it before. This is the kind of thing where, okay, how do I get involved in that? We'll tell you how to do it step by step. Selling merchandise, live shows, sponsorships, advertising, even your skills as a musician. And of course, one of the bigger topics that we've seen nowadays is the amount of money that you can make using crowdfunding platforms like Kickstarter and Indiegogo. We're going to have a step-by-step guide on how to do it based on very successful campaigns that have gone before. And we're going to walk you through it. But as we're going through this, we also want to talk about ways to minimize your spending, if that makes sense. So, how to get digital distribution? $0. CD and DVD manufacturing? $0. How to make merchandise for $0. There's a lot of options out there because of today's custom on-demand world where you actually don't have to pay anything in order to actually be able to sell things to customers and fans. It's very, very cool. We'll talk about how to do that in the future. For now, I want to cover basically in this course to maximize what you keep is what it's all about. And in order to do this, you actually really need to think about the three parts of each business transaction. So what do I mean by that? Let's go through this. The customer, of course, being the key one, but the reason why we bring this up, well, we'll get to it in a minute. The middleman and you. Let's start with the customer. It's where the money is coming from, right? That's the obvious thing. But more importantly than anything else is the question you ask yourself is how you get more sales. That tells you how you're going to market and what you're going to do in order to try and entice them to take part in that more often. The next is the middleman, which is who's handling the transaction and how are you getting paid? How am I set up to receive basically what you're trying to do? Because most of these middlemen actually have different terms. They actually change how they do it, and you actually have to make a good selection as to which middlemen you're going to be doing business with. It's pretty important. And finally, you. Now, this slide we're only going to spend a few minutes on right now, and we're never going to come back to it, really. We might mention it at one other point. But here's the thing. We are actually going to be giving you ways to make money with music, which means that they're going to be asking you to enter a tax ID. This is truly going to affect what you make. And that means that you've got to ask yourself, how are you set up to receive money? And these are 3 key points as it relates to this. One is tax reasons, of course. How you handle this and what your accountant tells you you can do actually can affect your income depending on where the money is coming into. Also, tax benefits like write-offs. If you do it the right way, your income should be offset by actually the expenses you're doing. Like that instrument you have, you can actually write it off, things like that. And finally, avoiding legal liability. Now, what does that mean? It means that if you have all of your business activities under one business, they're actually at risk for, if one part of the business, let's say, gets sued, they could get all of your business. But if you separate them legally, you can actually protect it. Like I said, I didn't want to go over this too much here. I just want to set this up and leave it aside. But I'd like you to think about this, because as soon as you start following this plan, you will be entering your tax ID in there, and that is a tax ID that's actually doing business, and it starts affecting all of these things. Does that make sense? Great. So let's take an example based on the 3 parts that we're talking about: the customer, the middleman, and you. The customers are the backers. So how do you get more backing money? Well, you actually try and get them to get either more donations or get a higher donation from the ones that you already have. And we're going to talk about how to do this. The second one is the crowdfunding platforms like Kickstarter, Pledge Music, and all of the others. They have different terms. They actually take different percentages out. And most people don't take that into account. You really need to think about that. And we're going to cover the differences. We're actually going to tell you how each of their plans map out and which ones might be best based on what your goals are. And then the third thing, of course, is what we just talked about, which is the tax ID that you put in. But before we begin, I want to tackle just some very, very basic questions here. Basic questions. Like, for example, who is this course for? Because we know that a lot of musicians come to this with a lot of different experiences and ideas on how to do things. You might have a music business that's just starting out, or you might have one that's really advanced. In particular, we're building on what we've written in the Indie Band Survival Guide. Now, while we could sit here and do a Music Business 101 course, in order to make money with music, you actually have to have a music business to build it on. Don't panic, because for all the things that we say that you should already have, we'll actually refer to the parts of the Indie Band Survival Guide that tell you how to build it from scratch. But beyond that, we'll also give you an idea about what you should be thinking about and where you can take it from there. The main thing is that you have music, fan base, and your web presence is already ready to go. We're going to have a deep focus, though, on the money part of the business, which is after you set it up. Now, for this course, we have a lot of experience teaching music business in Chicago. We do this very regularly. One of the things that we notice is before long, people are taking notes. You really want to have that handy, because we have a lot of links, a lot of services, a lot of information. This is 18 hours of content, and each slide actually has things that you're going to probably want to take notes on. We just recommend that you do that. The other thing is we left lots of space for you to ask questions. So feel free, if you have questions, for those of you online, if you have questions, we're happy to take it as we go, because we'll probably have a much harder time going backwards 30 slides to talk about a topic that we covered before. We're happy to take it as we go. We don't mind being interrupted, and it's actually something we're very used to, sort of classroom style. And then, of course, there's so many links. I think, is it 5 pages, Jason? 6 pages of links that we have that come out of this course. Single space. Is it small font? Very small font. Very small font. 6 pages of links that come out of this course. It's one of the things that you can get if you sign up for it. And in particular, useful resource for you if you get the course. So, let's talk about one of the bigger questions. Can you make your living off of music? Again, it's one of the bigger questions that we get, more than just about any other. And the answer is yes. And, there was an and. I bet you thought there was a but, right? We could have said but. I think we had but originally, didn't we? We did. Okay, we changed it to and, because that's like the improv thing, right? Yes, and. So yes, and all the people that we talk to who make their living off of music, and this shouldn't surprise anybody, all the people that we talk to have multiple sources of income, not just one. And the interesting thing is, none of them have the same sources of income. We didn't see two music businesses that were even closely resembling each other, which is why throughout this course we'll be giving you so many different ways that you can do this, because you need to choose the ones that matter to you. What we actually found was that most of them had 2, 3, or 4 big ones, and they were very deep. And then they left out the others. Now, that said, there are so many sources of income that we have here that are very easy. They're set it and forget it type of things, that you may as well do them. It's going to be great because you're going to be able to do it. In fact, for those of you online, you can actually just do it while we're talking about, oh, that's cool, when you go to this website and sign up. That's actually the way we tend to do it with music business students in Chicago. We'll say, bring your laptops, we don't mind. We'll help you do it. Now, we can't do tech support, we're on the air. But feel free to ask us questions along the way, and the host will feel free to be able to give us the questions as we go. We'll treat it just like another student in the classroom, and it should work out really well. Now, another question that we get fairly often. This comes up a lot, right? This is probably the central question, because everybody focuses on things that you can basically download, pirate, or get off the internet. It's very easy to do. How do you do that? How do you make a living out of music if people can just find and take the thing that you worked a year on and spent goodness knows how much money of studio time, and then you've mastered your album, and then you've put it out, done all this hard work marketing it, and they're like, hey, that's great, thanks. Here's where it goes. Atoms, not bits. I don't know if you've heard this term before, but it's the key to how you do things today, based on how the internet is set up. It's ironic. Why is it ironic? Take a look at these records and these other things here. People used to buy them, and yeah, they sure liked them as items to own. But what they really wanted was the music, right? That's what had the most value. But ironically, once you divorce it from a physical object, people actually think that it has less value. It's just something that goes on in their heads. Which means that you have to bring your music business, not just your music business, back to selling atoms to the extent that you can. And we're going to be talking about that throughout. That make sense? Yeah, okay. So, another question that you're probably having at this point as you're going forward. What type of skills do you need to get started making money with music? Right? It's probably a lot. And in fact, it is a lot. There's quite a few things. I mean, take a look at this list right here. Manager, booker, web designer, graphic artist, publicist. It goes on. TV, film, camera crew, editor. If you're going to do any kind of video work, and let's face it, it's very much worth it to do this because that's the thing that goes viral more than any other. An attorney and an accountant, which comes in more quickly than you think. A lot of what we do as musicians is actually impacted by the law. Surprisingly. I mean, the second you decide to cover a song, how do you pay the person who's supposedly owed money for it? It's music copyright, right? Well, there's 3 options. There's 3 DIY options based on this. Do it yourself. Find a friend or acquaintance to do it for you, right? Pay someone or a service to do it, or, any guesses this is the last one? Okay, no guesses. Well, you've seen it. It doesn't get done. And that happens a lot. And that's okay. It's actually something that happens to us all the time. We don't do all kinds of things. You can't. The list of things we don't do is long.
Yeah. But focus on the ones that can make you the
as Derek Sivers says, the one who founded CD Baby, we really like this quote, do it yourself doesn't mean do it all yourself. I mean, the key thing here being that it's not about, oh, I have to have my name in every single slot in the liner notes. I wrote, produced, mastered, did the marketing, wrote all the copy, did the PR. Remember this stuff? You don't have to list yourself next to every single name here, and every single role. The point is, you really want to get people to help you do it. You have to network. Sometimes it's a dirty term. People aren't used to doing it. Certainly everybody's sort of vaguely aware, I really should be networking in this music business. But then not everybody knows how to do it. And actually that is one of the places where we want to start, talking about how do you network. Just one final point on this. If you don't, you may not actually get enough stuff put together to actually make a business out of your music. So thinking about that, here's how to network in just one step. Now we like to do this just for every topic that we have a slide at the very beginning of many of our things that says, here's everything about marketing in one step, social media in one step. This is networking in one step. You actually, as you run into people, as you network, as you meet people, the first thought that you have is not and should not be, what can this person do for me? I think you know where I'm going here. It needs to be, what can I do for them? Now, why is that important? Why does that even work? Well, then you can ask them to pay you back. And it really is human nature that they're actually very inclined to do that at that point. There's a great book that talks about this called Influence, The Psychology of Persuasion. It's by Robert Cialdini. And it's very much worth getting if you want a good business book. It's kind of like mind control for business. So it gives you all these techniques that are like, oh, wait, and we're going to be talking about some of those techniques. We actually have different parts of our presentation when we bring this in. But it's part of marketing. It's part of how you deal with people. Well, considering this, considering that if you find out what people need and solve their problems and then ask them to help you, well, here's the best part. You probably already have a huge network already within your arm's reach that you can use. It's likely the case. Considering this, and this is another quote that we like quite a bit from Derek Sivers, and I remember when he explained this on an interview when we were talking to him for one of the books. He talked about the fact that, how there's things that you really love to do, you're really excited about. I don't just mean music. I mean the other things you like. Maybe you like web design. Maybe you really enjoy that kind of thing. There's probably a part of this music business that you hate, I would guess. Like the accounting or bookkeeping, or maybe you don't like doing graphic arts. I know, I don't know if I'm going to get in trouble by saying this here at Creative Live. I suck at graphic arts. I'm really terrible at that. I mean, I know what I like to see. I know what I'm looking for. But I'm really not very good at doing it. I have a graphic artist that loves doing that stuff. He studied it in college, and I go to him all the time. But, that said, he doesn't like coding nearly as much. Well, I'm an IT guy. I can code for 24 hours straight, and I'm thrilled. So how does this work? You put these things together. You make it all work together. So, the key is to change your thinking on the people that you already know. And what is it that we mean by that? Well, first of all, I'm going to break it into 3 categories just to make it really easy for you and have you think differently about the people that you do meet. First of all, you need skills and talents. So for some of the people that you meet, publicists, producers, graphic artists, photographers, people who have skills you need, it actually can help you succeed at what you're trying to do. So you meet somebody, and I don't know, this reminds me of, that's right, that story, the girl in the apartment upstairs. Yeah. That was a party you were at, right?
Yeah, that's a good example, I think, of one of the things that you want to do is to make your challenges or your problems known to the people around you so that you can uncover the hidden skills and talents that they have. And one of the things that we did for our second album, which was a Christmas album of sorts, It was an on-holiday.
Santa Doesn't Like You.
It was an on-holiday album. On-holiday album.
Songs like Code Naked, Drunk Christmas Shopping,
Smoking the Mistletoe.
Smoking the Mistletoe.
It's that kind of stuff. But one of the things that we did not have access to, that we did not know how to do, was the album art. And we didn't have access to software that actually could put it together. And one time at a party, we just were talking to people that were at the party. And it turned out that in the apartment that I was at, the girl from upstairs actually was a graphic artist that had all the programs that we would need. And when she said, "Hey, look, I can help you with that. I can solve that problem, basically. Plus, I'm looking to get something on my resume, something else that I can add to it."
Portfolio.
Exactly. So just by making your challenges known, or your problems, or what you're trying to solve known to those around you, sometimes you can tease out these skills. And she helped us put together the album, which was great. And it looked good.
It looked really good because she was able to put those. I mean, usually when we do things, it's just very plain, and she added those extra little elements that made the whole thing pop out and work out very well. So that's one thing, the skills and talents that you need. Here's another one. You're looking for opportunities in publicity. Now, the thing that all of these people have in common, what we call our opportunity network in the book, is that they have an audience that you can reach. Right? Now, that should be obvious. And most people, when they think audience that you can reach, they think of media like Oprah. Although I don't think she'd be interested in the Indie Band Survival Guide. It'd be nice if she did. I wouldn't mind going to the show. But that said, they all have an audience. Now, the interesting thing is we do think differently about this to the point where we try other things. And like the G-Bass story is actually a really good example of it. Because it was basically a website and a game creation place.
Right. I think to tell this story, it's we were definitely looking to broaden our audience, and how do we get beyond Chicago? So this is going back in time. So this is like 2000.
It was when our live shows, we'd done it a number of years. Our audience was starting to move to the suburbs and had kids. And we're like, we got to grow our audience again. Like, what about this internet thing?
This internet thing, there must be something there.
There must be something there.
So, geez, we're always like creating songs just out of, we're inspired by odd things. And we were playing a game that was created by this game company called Cheap Ass Games. Funny title for the company, but that's their title. And
games are $7.50.
Well, they were very
And they
cheap.
just give you like the board and some cards and the rules, and then they figure you can raid your Monopoly deck for the tokens and the dice and the play money and whatever else you need.
Yeah, we should be clear, it's not video games. It was a board
It's
game.
board games.
But there was a card that said, we're all these beer cans here last night. And I looked at it, I said, okay, that's a song. And we went off, like, I think the next rehearsal, and we actually wrote it.
Yeah.
And that's when we started connecting. Hang on, how do we get, if we wrote a song about this card that is in a cheap-ass game that they produced, they have an audience, and people have bought this game. Like, what we should do is take that song and let's connect with the game company. So we worked it out through email and everything, and we actually contacted the game company. They liked it. It's a very poppy, fun little song. And they asked if they could post it on their website. Now, again, this is back in
2002.
I think, 2002 or something like that, 2003. And, yeah, and they were excited, so they wanted to post it on their website. Well, like, we were amazed because what they did was they linked it to, we had the song hosted on our site, so we had all the statistics and we had all the analytics.
But then they put it on their front page.
But they linked to it through their front page, and like something like 15,000 downloads or something like that.
And it was crazy. And not only that, but at that time, if you searched on beer cans on Google, we were in the first 10 results.
Yeah.
Now, you wouldn't normally think of going after a website. You wouldn't think they would have an audience, but because these games were $7.50 and they had a lot of customers,
yeah.
And they had the kind of SEO that they really showed up very high, we actually reached so many people with this. It was huge.
Well, and then that got us into the this niche of gaming. there's a whole gaming world, and we'll talk about this in future lessons here, but there's this whole gaming world, and we were able to, through this brainstorm and making this happen, we actually became like the band that actually sang about gaming.
But it was such a, I mean, the thing is, from there we went on, and I don't think we have a story for it anyway, so we're not cutting something off later. But from there we went on to work with a company called Board Game Geek, which you might be like, okay, whatever, it's board games. They were getting 500,000 unique views a month. And we did a podcast theme song for them.
Right.
And some other music for them. And this is the thing. When you're looking to say, how can I help this person? It's not just about what you can do for them. It's not just about money. It's not just about any of these things. It's actually very often, we almost always started, can we get them some music? Because we're very good at making music. We've released over 500 songs, and we've got 19 albums with the 20th that should be out soon, I hope. And with this kind of thing, with so much music available to us, you'd be surprised at how often you solve people's problems. And actually, there's another part to the story.
Yeah, we should continue it. It's and again, this is like the niche that we went after, but the point is to think bigger for yourself and your music and what maybe you can target. So the song became very successful for Cheap Ass Games, and then they actually contacted us and said, would you think of actually doing a full album that we could sell, and if you could do it about all of our games? So we wrote an album called the Cheap Ass Album, which is a great title for an album, especially for our band.
Yeah, that's great.
And we actually were inspired by a lot of their games, and we wrote songs for them. They distributed the CD. So at that time,
distribution was difficult. 2003 is when that album came out.
Yeah,
that was really.
CD Baby, I think, was up and running.
It was. No, CD Baby's been around since '97.
Yeah,
but it was still a little difficult to do sales, but especially because people weren't as aware of CD Baby as a platform. Yep. Having a ready market to advertise to, and that's part of the other part of the story. One of the things, of course, you think of is doing the album art. Well, here's another opportunity for you. We actually contacted one of the board game art creators, and he happened to be a very well-known artist and comic book artist. He had an enormous number of fans. His name is Phil Falvio. Once we released this album, we wound up on a website that tracked all of the art that Phil made.
Yeah, he has avid fans who want to collect all the art that he makes. And he did our album cover.
Here's another audience. You see where the audience is. The audience is not just in the media. The audience isn't even just in websites. Even the artist who does your work can actually help promote everything. And that's how it comes together.
So again, last thought on that. Don't get lost in our story.
Right.
Don't get lost in the gaming thing. It's about thinking bigger and trying to match your music to opportunities that are out there. And again, we're going to talk about that in many of these lessons. Yeah.
Oh, sure. Yeah, we had a question from your transitor. They wanted to clarify, did you pay that girl from upstairs, or was this just like a good exchange of ideas, or is that something where you should pay someone for that?
Actually, it was a barter. That's basically what it was. She said, geez, I will do this for you because I want this on my resume. I want this as a part of my portfolio. And so it worked out really well on that end. But you could pay somebody. You could do that. But this is about networking and we're trying to save you money. So
well, there was a follow-up question to that from Archie, who's asked, how do you approach someone and ask them to do work for you? And how can you let them know it's okay to say no or arrange for compensation? Because even I felt that when I was listening, I was like, I'm the type of person who might be a little timid to make that initial conversation.
A headlock.
The interesting thing is, in that situation, we weren't going around saying, oh, you do art, can you do this for us? It was at a party, we're like, we don't know anybody who has, it was AI, and we don't have this Adobe Illustrator. We don't have this program. We don't know anything about it. We're trying to do it now. She's like, well, I do that. And she volunteered. So one of the key things, and we're going to get to it in a later slide, but I mean, this is a good time to bring it up, is that you actually should take every problem that you have, and especially because now you're a small business, you're a musician, and just talk about it. I'm serious. It works. I mean, you wouldn't be surprised. And there's a lot of different ways. I mean, how many
bounce ideas?
The trombone player.
Yeah, what about that? Like, that was just...
You were just talking about, we don't have a trombone player.
Oh, that's right. I was talking in line, ordering a burger while waiting for our turn, and
for the fest.
I can't remember who I was talking to. I was like, geez, what we need is a trombone for this song. We were trying to record a song that we had the trumpets, but we didn't have any trombone. And I was just talking out loud, and the guy in front of me turns around and says, well, I played trombone. And he was a student. He was a student at Northwestern.
Yeah.
And there you go. That's how you do it. You go to your favorite fast food restaurant and you just say what you know, hey, I need help.
There's your formula. That is
But you never know where somebody could actually come out of the woodwork and help you. Now, in that case, that wasn't somebody who was in our network.
Right.
That was actually a new, well, I guess we were networking in some ways. But, like, a lot of this is you will be surprised at how many people you know, or maybe it was in your band, or people, your family, or whatever, that can have all these hidden skills and talents, or know somebody who can get you in touch with a blogger or a podcaster or what have you. And the idea is just, and the main point that Randy's making here is that you just have to change your thinking a bit on how you do that. And that's how you kind of discover opportunities. And you should be nice to people. And you should offer, like we said, offer them something.
Absolutely. I mean, we're not, just to be clear, we're not just saying go out there, network, and find somebody to do it for free. Yeah. It is sometimes about compensating people, but then again, it could also be about finding somebody who can do it cheaper, or somebody you can work with more closely. But our favorite situations are barter, and our very favorite situations is when we can barter music for services and stuff.
Yeah.
It tends to work out really well that way.
Good. Great question.
Anything else?
You know, you kind of answered as it came in. Your transistor followed the original question was saying basically exactly what you were saying, that you need to find a creative solution to make both parties happy.
Perfect.
Excellent. Very good. Okay. Well done. Well, then that's 2. We're at 2 out of 3, right? So back to the slides. What we have here is that you also need business partners, right? You need people who basically want your music or music services. And remember what these 3 categories are for, is you meet people. It's the thing after you figure out how you can help them. You know, because again, we did start by saying we want to find out how we can help people. There's a lot of people that we just helped out. We never necessarily got anything for it, but we're happy to give them some help. But we were repaid over and over and over again in so many cases.
It's a karma thing.
It is a karma thing. And the way this kind of thing works is trying to connect to people that can help. Actually, that's another good story, the International Pop Overthrow.
So how we got connected to the person who ran this festival. So International Pop Overthrow is a very cool festival that goes to city, basically. It's run by David Bash, I believe.
Yeah, David Bash.
And it was perfect for our poppy music. It's like, that's the festival we should get into. It's very upbeat and poppy. And we struggled for, I think, a year or two just trying to figure out how do we connect with this guy, how do we get in with him and all that kind of stuff. And,
try and get in the festival.
Right. And it's very difficult, and it can be difficult to actually try to make these opportunities happen for yourself. But what did we do? We ended up, we knew somebody who was already playing in the festival. Yes.
And we asked, hey, do you know, can you tell us, how did you get this? It's like, oh, it's run by David Bash, I can introduce you. And actually, she did. We went to her show, and we actually got to shake the guy's hand, got to meet him in person, and told him, hey, we're available in case you're ever looking for anything, maybe next year. And then, sure enough, the next day, I got a call. I remember that always. And it's like, hey, I just had a cancellation. Can you guys fill in? Would you guys play at our festival? Which was perfect. Absolutely ideal. Because from there, we were on stage. We had the International Pop Overthrow. Played that number of years since then. And, it was a great thing to do. And, again, this is just another category of people you could be looking for. There's another thing that we've run into very often that it surprisingly works out really well. You want to know people before they're famous. All right, so you're probably thinking, how do I know who's going to be famous? I mean, you're meeting all kinds of people all the time, and somebody could make it and other people can't. It's like a lottery ticket, right? The key to this is to hang around with really creative people that have aspirations. You don't know which of them are going to actually make it anywhere, but one of them might. And in particular, this is something that we did. It started when one of our friends who did Second City decided to do a show.
Yeah, live show.
It was a sketch comedy show.
Yeah.
And they were looking for somebody to do music with them. And they said, hey, we have an idea. We'll do a Saturday Night Live style thing. You guys will play behind a couple of sketches, and then we'll have a part in the middle where you can kind of play your songs. And it worked out really well for them, by the way. What we all got out of it was that they got our draw to help them bring people into the comedy show. Because when you're at Second City, you actually bid to get one of the 3 stages if you've gone through the whole Second City program. That's how it works. And so, yeah, one of the things they're looking for is, well, how can you market this? How can you tell me how many people are going to show up, right? So, like, we teamed up with a band, and they have a draw, and they'll bring people in. They had their own draw, so we got to bring in new people. We got something that I like to call basically something to add to our band resume that we've played at Second City, which is really cool and something that helps establish our credibility. And then from all of this, after all of this, we actually ended up with a huge new group of creative people that we were associated with. And they went on, did another show. We actually did music for another show. And then amongst all these people, one of them had aspirations to create a production house. And what happened from there again?
Well, he created a TV show called DVD Geeks. DVD Geeks. And so when he thought of, we need a theme song for this thing, he immediately thought of us, because we were always helping people, again, going back to the main point of networking, trying to solve their problems. And then eventually something can connect, and you can ask them directly, or something like this can happen. So he's like, you guys have the right style of music, and we would like something that's very surf rock and 50s-esque and Hawaii Five-0 type thing. And that's kind of my vision, and can you do that? And the answer was,
no, of course not.
No, we couldn't. No. The answer was yes, of course you can do that. And so we went to the studio, wrote something, went back, presented a couple of ideas. He said, I want that one. Went back, recorded that one, developed that, and there we go. And that became the theme. And then we did a lot of little steps.
The beds, bumpers, and themes on top of that. Yeah. And there's 3 things you normally do with television, by the way. The theme song most people are familiar with. The bumpers are those little audio cues in between scenes that kind of cue things. And that's music too. That counts. And then there's beds, which is music that goes on underneath while they're actually doing the talking and everything that they're doing. Well, we did all the music for the show. And then it was shown in how many homes?
Then he got it picked up, and it was shown in 26 million homes. So the season was played out on TV. And again, how did that happen? How do we do that? It was actually knowing somebody before they were famous. Just like now we know you before you guys are famous, right? And that's just the point again of that story is to think long term. If you're in it to make money, and if you're in it in music because you love it, this networking thing doesn't. It's not just a one-off thing. You build it into your character and what you do, and you should always be out looking out for people who are going places and try to help them. It really paid off for us.
Our recommendation is to team up with people who are creative, who are not your type of artist. You know what I'm saying here? I'm not just saying you can hang around with other musicians. You will. You won't be able to handle. We're musicians, right? Normally we play in groups. But it goes beyond that. We really think you should team up with people who are visual artists, people who are theater people, even though they sometimes like oil and water, I know. You guys have had to have run into that before, right? Yeah, okay. Nodding in the audience there. So you have that, but no matter what it is, those groups of people, they end up doing different things. And the amazing thing is, pretty much every type of creative tends to need music. and you can fill that slot. And actually, that leads to a point that I don't think we have a slide for this, but I usually talk about it, which is that when we network, we go to some music conventions, and people are always asking us, are you going to NAMM? Are you going to South by Southwest? I like to go to conventions of creators of other sorts, especially people with new media, because they're all looking for music, because they need the music. I, very often, when I go to some of these conventions, or when we go, we're the only musicians in the room. Actually, one of the people that we deal with says, you know what, I don't network in other places with music. I actually go to chambers of commerce. I'm like, why do you do that? He had a studio, among other things. He's like, well, because I have a studio. And everyone else is like, I'm an accountant, or I do computer consulting, right? You can imagine the types of people that are coming there. And he goes, I'm a musician. And I go like, wow, that's different. He's like, and guess, you know what? I'll do one free radio spot for you. You can come into my studio. I mean, studio time doesn't cost anything when you own the studio. Radio spots are easy to do compared to music. And this is advice for any of you who are starting a music studio or have an idea like this. Try this. All you have to do is show up at a Chamber of Commerce meeting, be the only musician there, make an offer to do a radio spot. Some of those guys will become repeat customers. From then on, they're like, wait, I never thought that radio was in my zone. I never thought I could afford it. I never even thought of doing a radio commercial. It could even happen with video nowadays, since it's much easier to put together than you ever could.
Yeah, and I think the point is, taking it back to the networking, is that you stand out. If you go to music conventions, well, then you're just a musician with other musicians. If you can think of other gatherings, like this is really unique, the Chamber of Commerce thing.
Yeah.
But it's like you stand out, and then it makes it actually easier to network, because people are like, well, what are you? Oh, I'm a musician. Oh, okay. I'm not used to talking to a musician here. And then you can start fishing out opportunities and stuff as well in that context.
Definitely. So, we like to give very practical material. We don't just like to say, network, go, get out there. We like to give you more specific things. So these are all techniques that we have used that have worked really well for us when you network. Top 5. First of all, cross-promotion. It should be obvious. Should be the most obvious thing we have here. You have fans, they have fans. Introduce your work to each other's fans. Guess what? Most of these guys that you deal with that are even in media, especially when they're somewhat smaller media, they're hungry to actually get their material exposed to new audiences. That is their problem. Remember we talked about networking in the beginning? Solve their problem. Get in their heads. The number one problem that a media person has is, how do I grow my audience? Well, once you're a musician, you've actually established yourself. You've got a web presence. You've got some of these other things. Use it. They're happy to see that. And actually very closely tied to this is what we call link love. You've probably heard that term before. This is so easy to do. I don't know why everybody doesn't do it all the time. Why don't you just spend all your time shining lights on others? They'll pay back. They'll start talking about you. In fact, the thing that's music to everybody's ears is their own name. It's probably the number one thing. Well, their name on the internet, when you're talking about somebody else, works. And then they tend to link back to you, which we've gotten a lot of mileage out of this one. We've used it quite often.
Well, this one, just to be specific, it's about hyperlinking. It's actually linking to their blog or linking to their Twitter account or what have you. But if they've helped you out, then, or if it's something that you really appreciate, you can link to them. And they find out about this because of analytics and all these other kind of things. And we talk about that in the book, but they find out and then they know.
Well, we often tell them.
Oh, we also go out and we tell them. That's right.
And you should. Go ahead and send them an email. Say, hey, we talked about you. They may not answer, but you'd be surprised at people who you might think are out of reach and go, oh, thank you very much. Especially because, like we talked about in this prior slide, these podcasters and bloggers, even though they might have large audiences, are a little bit easier to reach. That's what I love about new media nowadays. It's really great from that standpoint. So, next, giving credit. Another thing that we don't know why everybody doesn't do all of the time. I mean, put their name in lines. what does it cost you? I mean, ironically, this business that seems like it's all about ego, is actually about pushing it out and giving credit to everybody else. Constantly thinking of the other person. And your stature gets raised because you're the one that's doing it. I mean, you're still there. You're in the picture. You're not, like, giving anything up by doing it. And yet, you do liner notes, and you don't thank everybody that it helped you with your album in every single way. You're making a mistake. Because if you're going to try and get their help later, they're going to be more willing to do it if they actually got acknowledged. Right?
That's a good point. So tying it back to the story about the girl in the apartment upstairs, we did credit her in the album as well. And it's very easy to do. And then since she had the program, she typed her name in.
I guess we couldn't even keep her out of the notes if we wanted to.
No. Okay. We have a quick side note here from DT2K on Twitter. I was just curious to know what kind of music you guys play. For those who are not familiar, that'd be helpful to just kind of address that, because we have musicians here who play all different types of music, so we're trying to get everyone on the same page. That's a very good question, and we can take a pause here to talk about it. We describe ourselves as horn-powered geek rock. So we are an 8-piece band, like a rock band, but then with a trumpet, trombone, saxophone. Randy plays saxophone, baritone saxophone, actually. Yeah, and we're kind of in the style of They Might Be Giants, kind of quirky with a little bit of sense of humor. That's our thing.
And by the way, what Jason just did right here, being able to lay out exactly what we sound like, both with a description of the music and then comparing it to a known band, is your most effective and easy way to do it. You'd be surprised at how hard it is to do this for your own music. It actually took a lot of practice to get to the point where you can just say, oh, we sound like this.
Yeah, no, that took...
We'll talk about this in a little bit during the bar.
That's a sneak peek for a future lesson. Yes, so that's the type of music that we play. So then, and again, this is very important. There's many different styles, many different genres, and musicians do so many different types of things. The idea is not to get lost in any of our examples, per se. These are the examples, we're applying the principles, and the principles are the key thing to keep in mind. That's why we're teasing them out, and then apply that to your own music. Not the, per se, like we're going after the gaming niche.
The various things that we did specifically are stories.
They fit our music really, really well, and so that's kind of the thinking that we did with that. But the principles can be applied no matter what genre you're in, no matter what style you do, or what have you. And there you go.
Yeah, sure. A couple other things about our band. Like I said before, we have 19 albums. We've licensed music to Disney and Viacom, and had music videos played on Spike TV.
We played at Second City.
All establishing our resume. And probably my favorite achievement that we've done is that in 2007 we released a song every single day of the year for a year. 365 songs in order to build our audience, do marketing, get PR, and to grow what we had. And it worked extremely well. We had lots of, by the time we were doing it every hour of every day, and then after a while, like every 15 minutes of every day, somebody was listening to a song of ours from our website, because we could tell from the web analytics. You really have to do something that stands out, right? That's part of the whole thing. The other thing, of course, is that it gave us an awful lot of music to make and to work with, and to license and to sell. And that alone was 12 of the 19 albums that we have. One per month, and they're not normal length albums, naturally, right? They're between 28 and 31 songs.
That's very good, Randy.
Yeah.
You know your months.
I used to know my months. Well, it wasn't a leap year, so it was like 28, 29, 28.
Was it a leap year? No, I think it was.
No. 8 months right there. Sorry. Which, we had one last song. Remember we talked about, shoot.
Oh, yeah.
366.
That wasn't.
So we've been out there. We're good at writing music, and so one of the key things is it made it easier for us to do licensing and royalties and try and get stuff played, because we had a lot of opportunities to try and take various songs of ours and do it. Plus, we wrote songs about just about every topic you can possibly imagine, and that helped us. We'll talk about this a little later, and what we did. So
we have a question come in just in regards to the slides about Alexa Lustro said, how big do you think your audience has to be in order for you to approach media for cross promotion? And if you think that that's something, what would you say to beginner musicians that are feeling that way?
That is an excellent question. And the truth is, there's no limit because there's no general way to tell how big an audience is in the first place. Now, there's a website called Next Big Sound, which kind of aggregates the counts of the number of subscribers on YouTube and people following you on each of the various social medias like Twitter and everything. It kind of aggregates that to a number, but not everybody knows to look to that. The truth is just starting out is enough, especially, and this is where when we just first started, it was more effective for us to give music because that was more concrete. But the media that you should approach when you're starting out isn't this size media. It's things within your reach. And we're constantly surprised at how successful we can do things within our reach and then how that increases our scope every time. Partly because some of the things that we did added to what I like to call our band resume, or a topic that we'll talk about in the marketing slides called borrowed credibility. We'll talk about that in the future. The Second City thing that we did, just to give you an idea, was not something we did with a huge sketch comedy group that we had to reach out for. It was some guys that we hung around with in a creative circle. And so that's why we like starting out with like theater schools, with groups of people who are like, you guys, what you're doing, you have in just your local school people that you should be connecting with because they are people who are before they become famous types. And then for each thing that you do, what you do is you bring it to them and say, oh, I played at Second City. And then all of a sudden, once you say that, you actually get that one mark and you can raise the notch up. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I think there's one more point to that, and that is just ask. Just do it anyway. Like when we did the cheap ass games, like that just seemed like it would have been way out of our reach.
Right.
But we asked, and it was a great connector, and it really worked for us. And like if we never asked, if we doubted, like, oh well, I don't know if our audience is X amount and what theirs is, we might have not done it, but we did it. And it's all you need is a few of those things to connect, and then you can start growing it, which is what Randy was just saying. So that's a very good question. Yeah.
So we're at number 3. Here's another one. These are practical networking techniques, just to remind us where we've been covered from. Celebrate successes. We like to borrow this one from theater. There's a cast party after every run, right? And it's surprising how often people will do it and then they'll celebrate and they won't include everybody that helped them. Look, just get a keg and thank everybody. It's not hard. You're underage, don't buy a keg. Get somebody else to buy a keg.
Pizza's good.
Pizza will work.
Pizza's a safe space, yeah.
That gets you.
Instead of keg.
Right. Pizza and a keg. So you get that, and the thing that's not on this slide, that's sort of something we want to bring up here, is that we won't just have this party. We'll actually usually talk about the next project that we're working on, which we had been planning before this one ended, so we can grab the energy and the momentum and pull them along with us. It's like, yeah, we did it. We did the song of the day and it's done, and yeah, let's do the next project. And all of a sudden they're coming along with you and continuing to help you and be part of your circle, and that's how it grows. That's how your team grows. And they're really more willing to help you in the future once they've done that. We talk about doing things for free. They're just part of your creative circle. It's not necessarily about business in that case. So, I mean, it's kind of funny because here we're talking about business, but it's bigger than that. Music is something that really happens very organically. It happens where they've actually shown in studies that once money becomes part of creativity, it makes people less creative, not more. They did it by taking people like, hey, come up with ideas. They took a group of people like, we'll pay you 5 cents for every idea. And they said that the ones where they paid for it had not only less ideas,
poster again that kind of feeds off of that statement. Was asking, is the principle really to just think like an entrepreneur?
Yes. Well done. That's very good. Yes, I like that. That's
Great.
a really good way to think about it.
Okay.
And there is one unique aspect to this entrepreneurship question when you're in music, which is that people root for musicians. They love to say, I was part of this artist. You know, when they were starting, I helped out this band make their album or put on this tour or whatever it is that your crazy project is. So there's another aspect to this that people really want to be involved. And you need to sell it that way. You need to build it up and make it into something. That's a great point.
I think it's a great point, and in a way, that's what this course is going to be about. It's one thing to think like an entrepreneur. That's a great, I think, Oprah could actually say that. But then what we're going to do is actually give you all like techniques that you can actually apply to be thinking like an entrepreneur, and then you'll be able to do, as Randy said at the beginning, right away.
And specifically an entrepreneur within the music business.
Yes, perfect. Well said.
Exactly. Good.
Great.
Excellent. So, and then there's the most effective networking technique of all. This is one you should always be thinking about. The warm handoff. Now, the warm handoff is just like this. It says in one sentence, can you introduce me to? If you are submitting your stuff to somebody who is inundated with submissions, and now it's not as physical as it used to be, you know, like there'd be a physical stack of stuff, maybe it's a huge set of emails. You compare that to actually having a situation where somebody who they already know is saying, this, you've got to check out this artist, they're great. The second one will always win. Will always win. Will always work out. And considering this, you really should always be thinking about not just the three things we talked about earlier, which is just, you know, opportunities and skills and is this a business partner for me, but also who do they know? Who do they know? And the surprising thing is, I guarantee this, you do not know who, even the people in the circles that you already have, you do not know who they know. And if you just ask, I'd really like to get in touch with, well, we did it with David Bash.
Yeah.
And then, you know, Yvonne Dahl of the Locals said, yeah, I know him. I can introduce you to him, no problem. It's the same thing as the problem thing we were talking about earlier, but this time it's with a name, people's names.
That's very specific.
Right.
Can you introduce me to somebody who does this, or can you introduce me to David Bash?
David Bash. Anybody can help.
It's very powerful.
Using social networks. I don't know why we forget that we're constantly connected to social networks. It's constant, but you take that same thing where you're talking about it in the line of a generic fast food restaurant and about how you need a trombone player, and then you mention it online. It's like, hey, does anybody know a trombone player? Suddenly, it's amazing. People will come to you with all of these potential solutions. It's truly unbelievable how easy it is to actually take advantage of this.
Yeah.
And
it makes it easier in a lot of ways, actually.
And I mean, the messages can be really short. I mean, with Twitter and all these other things nowadays, you're like, hey, anybody know this or anybody know how to solve this problem? It actually starts to pull things together. And then this is probably the most amazing one that I don't know why everybody forgets it. It's the powerful network that's usually forgotten. Any guesses? What we might be talking about? Oh, cell phones.
Cell phone network.
Cell phones.
That's terrific.
Yeah. No, that is a powerful network, though. That's pretty good. There's groups of people.
Yeah.
And it is your fans.
Your fans. With cell phones.
With cell phones. It doesn't hurt. Fans. Your fan. And here's why I think there's still something in our heads from the time that we were younger, which is a longer time ago than, you know, if you guys are starting out, you're already in this. But I think that people still think think along the lines of the fans are something separate from me that I don't get to know who they are or even communicate with them. In fact, I'm going to keep them at arm's length. I'm going to keep them away from us. Meanwhile, you've got the social media. They expect to be engaged. And actually, I want to be really specific about this because there's actually some really good stories that come out of this. Do you want to tell the Jonathan Coulton thing?
Booking Live. Okay, so again, so your fans can help you. They are the network, your friends and family and all that kind of stuff. Jonathan Coulton is a very successful indie musician who's done it all without a label. He's out of New York, out of Brooklyn. And let's see, this is about him touring. So he had a chance, something had to bring him to Seattle.
It was his friend in Seattle that just said, hey, why don't you come visit? He's like, you know what? I'd like to play a show, but I don't
But he doesn't know Seattle, he doesn't know what venues would be good.
And he didn't want to convince the venues that he would bring an audience. It was like...
right, and it was such a last-minute thanks for the moment type thing. So what he did was he actually asked his fans. He just kind of opened it up and actually put a blog on it or something.
Right.
And when that happened, there was two fans in particular that said, if you can come to who were in Seattle, if you can come to Seattle, like, we can set up the venue. We'll get off. We know the scene, so we can get you. We would just love to see you here. So he actually basically outsourced the booking to these guys. And I think he said that they got two venues ready. So they actually brought him a choice to where he could play, which is fantastic. And they ended up picking one, and then he did play the show. I don't know if there's another point on that one you want to talk about.
No, but that's the key thing. Well, actually, there is something. I mean, talking about entrepreneurship, his fans are happy to do this. It's not like they took a booking cut. They weren't looking for that. They just wanted him to play. He also went out of his way to engage with his fans. He had message boards on his website, and he had a very active fan community that really was rooting for him. This level of interaction is what you should be striving to do, and then thinking about it, how they can solve problems. The second story, Brad Sucks, it's BradSucks.net, and
That's the name of the band.
It's the name of the band, but he has the best tagline, I think, of just about any. It's a one-man band with no fans, which is what, I mean, it challenges you to want to be a fan to prove him wrong. And, more and more, he gets more and more people. Well, you're like, okay, so that's cool, but what did he do that was special? Well, he actually has very remixable music, and people just love remixing his stuff. So he was on a website called CC Mixer. Yeah, CC Mixer. And CC Mixer allows you to just upload your source tracks, and then it has a license on there that basically says, hey, feel free to remix my stuff. I don't mind. It's okay. You can do this. Well, considering that, he had a lot of people remixing his music and doing it, so much so that he was able to make an entire album of remixes, which is cool. I was able to sell that. Well, if you think about it, every single remixer has their own audience too, which only grew his audience bigger. See how that can work. And again, these people are not just fans. Now, today's fans are collaborators, but they can create stuff with you, or for you, or about you. Actually, Jonathan Coulton never I don't think he's still made any videos.
I think he's made videos now.
He's finally made videos, but throughout a lot of his career, his fans were the only ones that made videos, and he was happy to have them do it, and happy to let them do it.
So we should talk about a bit how did he cultivate his fan base? And I think the key thing is what he did very religiously was he wrote back to every fan who wrote him. If there was any comment on his blog, he commented back. If there was emails sent to him, and he said there was a lot of emails that were sent to him, he wrote them all. He treated every single contact from a fan as special. And he would go to the coffee shop and sit down and type away an answer. And he did that religiously. And he talked about that as like a full-time job. threat in a lot of ways. But that is then he was building that connection one by one fan at a time, at a time, at a time, at a time. And that's how he actually started really building that relationship, which allowed him then to go, hey, I'm going to play in Seattle. Where should I play? And able to actually get his fan network to actually help him out. So he opened it up so that his music can be used for videos. I think there was a comic book or an art book that another fan said, like, look, here's an email came in. I'm so inspired by your music. I would like to do artwork for it, and I'd like to sell a book with it. Maybe we can work together on that. I think he said yes to that. And there's a couple other things like that he would work and collaborate actually with his fans to create something new and to create extensions of stuff that he would never even have thought that he would be able to do because he's so focused on the music. So that's that point.
So beyond the fan network, you can actually go beyond your network if it starts to run dry. There are so many incredible options lately. Sites and services, certainly, and we have tons of them on the Lincoln resource sheet that you can get if you purchase the course. But beyond that, here's just a few examples of the things that are out there that are actually surprisingly within range. Fiverr is very interesting. It's basically asking people to do something for $5. And you might have a task that you're not very good at that you just need to have, hey, can somebody help me do this web page or solve this little problem? You might not have to pay for a big consultant. You could actually ask for somebody on the internet to do it. Amazon's Mechanical Turk, what did they say? You said it the other day.
Their tagline is artificial intelligence. So basically what that is a pool of people who get paid money to actually do work.
Manual tasks, whatever you want. Do research on something, type transcribe something.
Yeah.
Whatever it is that you're looking for, it's out there. Craigslist is surprisingly within range too, and Elance is one that is more for any kind of consulting services you're looking for, freelancers, all of that kind of stuff. Every skill that you might think that you need, including some very esoteric skills, are out there and available for you to reach just through the internet.
Right. Exactly. Okay.
So,
and then there's even yet another place you can tap talent, and that's musician communities. And there are way too many communities to even cover. If you play an instrument, seems like every instrument has a forum or a bulletin board or a community associated with it. I always think our bass player hangs out in the bass forums. Songwriting communities, singing communities, DJ, you name it. And there's communities of musicians getting together, talking about their problems, or talking about things that they want to connect with, talking about creative projects, talking about how to get play better on their instrument or whatever. But it is a wealth of talent and information that you can explore. I think even services. So we're going to talk about a lot of the sites and services in the next lessons, many lessons. But almost, it seems like many of the services also have communities that have surrounded it, like CD Baby comes to mind, Reformation comes to mind, where again, musicians trying to solve problems, trying to help each other out, gather. And then of course there's IndieGuy.com, and then there's musician communities like JP Folks,
Just Plain Folks, which is a great. If you haven't checked that out, it's free to join. Tons of musicians in just about every city, all over the place, all over the world, and they're just there. I would add to it one other thing, which is, if you have your own studio at home and you use Sonar as we do, or whatever program you use, there's communities behind those that can help you solve all kinds of problems, which is a big part of this whole thing.
We have a question coming from Keith. He was wondering your thoughts on what you think of releasing unfinished material. Should you give out your product should you wait till it's finished?
So that's a good question.
That's a very good
We're going to talk about that in the next session. So that's a really good thing.
you want to get a sneak peek?
No. Okay. Let's leave him hanging.
We'll tell Keith he's going to wait till the next section.
The next session, what we're going to be talking about is how to prepare your music for sale. So today, aside from this first one, is all about your music. The next one is preparing your music. The next one is selling your music, and then it's promoting your music. And it's all about these various ways that you can do things. So a big thing about preparing your music is deciding when to release it. We don't have a slide on that in particular, but sometimes those demo tracks can be very useful, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. Right.
So, you want to review real quick?
Sure. So,
all the different networks that we talked about, fans and friends, we just talked about musician communities, we talked about the sites and services, which we will be talking extensively about in the next lessons, that can solve your problems and connect you with opportunities and stuff, and many are free.
Yes.
And then we talked about, was there one more? Can't remember now. And you have the clicker, so I don't know. But we talked about many different networks that you can tap to help you do it yourself. This is the big key thing.
Yeah, the key thing is you aren't alone, and nor should you try and do it all yourself. You certainly should try and find people that do things that really drain you, because that will kill your creativity. That will kill all of the impetus you had to do this in the first place. And once you take advantage of the ones that are within reach, you can get busy making music. Which, let's face it, I mean, that's what we're here to do. I enjoy doing marketing, I enjoy doing PR work, but at the end, what I really want to be doing is have my horn, and be playing and be writing new music and performing and doing all that kind of stuff. So there's a mix of these things. Let's face it too, every musician that you've seen which is really big and really successful, they all have teams of people around them. That's what it's about. That's what they do. So, learning more. We always end each of our sessions with learning more. First of all, in the book, we actually have a whole thing on networking. It's not just networking in general, it's networking for musicians. So a lot of the stuff that we talk about here, and it's in a chapter called Your Team. That's what we call it. How to find people to fill skills that you need when your network runs dry, how to network in the music industry in particular, all kinds of topics like that are things that we like to cover.
Perfect. Well, we certainly have some. Do we have one right here?
Yeah.
Great.
We talked about engaging with fans. Like, you guys have some good examples of ways to engage with your fans through social networks like Twitter or Instagram or those?
You should, yes, definitely. And now you're talking about your web presence and your web strategy, actually, in a lot of ways you should.
Yes.
That is exactly what you should be doing. Do you have a Twitter account? Yeah, okay. And yet you're on Instagram as well? Okay. You're probably on Facebook?
Yes.
And let's think of some more. You're on LinkedIn? No.
You should be. There's some musicians who are thinking, I don't need to be on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is great. It allows you to connect to people and find out who they're connected to.
Yeah.
It's great.
Exactly. But yes, those channels are key. And, going back to the book, and one of the things that we won't be talking about really is about using we'll talk about it where it pertains to making money, but in general, your web and your and social networking and mobile strategy, which we cover in the book in depth. I mean, it's like 3 chapters of tackling this stuff. You should have a strategy around how you present yourself and how you should actually engage people through Facebook and Twitter and all that kind of stuff. And we do talk about that in depth in the book, and then give a lot of tips on keep it short for Twitter, of course, obviously. But I don't know if you have anything else to add on that.
No, I mean, it really comes down to talking about your problems, oddly enough. That's the thing. Now, with fans, also, you can organize some things. Some people do contests and other things to try and get people to help choose the album art or other things like that. To the extent that they're involved and plugged into it, the more they're likely to be good customers and buy stuff and do it. I think this new revolution of crowdfunding is fascinating to me because people will contribute. They'll actually say, oh, I want to help make your new album a success or your tour or whatever it is that you're trying to fund. And then when they buy into it, actually they're more likely on the other end of it to really even be more involved. They're also likely to think that they're a part owner and
cyber, the PR, Ariel Hyatt could actually is a great resource to tackle how you interact. Because you're talking about engagement with fans through social networking. That book, which is a giveaway, actually walks you through those type of steps and how to actually go do that. So we talked about Jonathan Colton. He would coffee shop, you sit down and you answer all his emails and engage that way as well. Well, she actually illustrates a lot of like how you should, the importance of asking the right questions, and how you should limit promoting yourself and your album, because you don't want to be the steady stream of buy my album, buy my album, buy my album, buy my album. You really want to engage, and that means it's a back and forth discussion.
Engagement, shining, what it is in general is engagement, shining a light on others. Like any fans you have that have their own thing, go promote them. They'll be thrilled if they like your stuff, right? And also sharing things of interest to them. So if you've got a particular type of music that you do, you can talk about that type of music going on in your town. They're going to pay attention to you, right? Because they're interested in it. And then they're going to be more interested in hearing about your show. I want to get to a couple of the other questions.
Well, the book that you mentioned, that's the Cyber PR for Musicians by Ariel Hyatt.
Exactly, and that will have like recipes on how to really engage your fan base. Now we'll talk about that throughout the lessons coming up, especially where it's about making money. Our focus here is about making money, but that's a key thing is, of course, building that community, which is why we lead off with that.
Great. Now, we have a two-part question here from Keith, and this may be covered in the future segments, so just let us know.
Sure.
But first off, he says, how much time do you dedicate to PR as opposed to playing the gigs? How much time should I focus on trying to brand myself and market myself if I'm focusing on music? And secondly, this is a comment regarding Brad Suggs and Jonathan Colton saying, he noticed that both of them licensed under Creative Commons. Is that the way to go? Are we going to be touching on that throughout this course?
Both good questions. They're both very good questions. So,
they're difficult to answer.
I forgot the first one already. So
He was asking how much time you should spend on your craft versus PR marketing.
Wow, that's hard. I mean, there's no way we can give you an answer, a direct answer.
Well, I guess you would start by saying, do you like PR?
Yeah.
Because like Randy was talking about, he likes coding, so we would always put him to work on coding stuff. But he doesn't do graphic art and stuff, so we would have our other friend actually help us on that. So if he's big into PR and he's really intrigued by it and everything, we're definitely going to touch PR and marketing in future lessons here. Maybe then he would want to put some time in it. Yeah, if he's a musician per se, that's like, I don't want anything to do with that. That's where this networking stuff actually comes in handy. You can hopefully get somebody, you can connect with somebody who will help you with that. Now, thinking through, let's say Jonathan Colton, like he actually in the very beginning, I don't know if he does it now because he's very established at this point and he doesn't have the time. But at the very beginning, like I said, he engaged with every fan who wrote him, and he would then ask questions. He would always be asking questions through his blog and his fans about, I want to do this, but how do I do this? And it just cultivated people who really wanted to help him, which was fantastic. And he would actually set aside, I think it was like 2 to 3 hours of ED. So that's the part to answer that.
And that's fan engagement, right?
Yeah.
And that's actually
very comfortable with
It's
that.
more effective than PR at the beginning. It truly is. And if you have a live show going on, by the way, that thing will build itself. You'll have a draw. Once you get to a certain size venue, the larger venues don't take chances on people. They don't. I mean, they want to get people in the door. So once you get to that point, you'll have an easier time getting PR. It'll come. A lot of things about spending time, that's one of your most limited resources besides money. And you should only spend as much time as you can spare and as you can do while keeping the music going, because the music is at the heart of the whole thing. And if there's a general answer, it has to be that. Now, that said, the very last session, if you can hang on to the very last day, is about PR and how you can do PR that's within your arm's reach. And we'll talk about that. We'll give you ways to do it that won't take all of your time. Right? And then the other question was about the Creative Commons. It is the right way for some people, it isn't for others. And we talk about this in the book. this is one of the ways that you can use copyright to promote your music, not just protect your music. The way that Creative Commons works is instead of having to go to a lawyer and try and figure out, can I do this with your music or can't I? They have very specific and very clearly written license terms that says share it all you want. I don't care. It's okay. You don't have to ask me. And then they have permission and it gets out there. That's how the Indie Band Survival Guide, the book, started. It was a 101-page, 50,000-word PDF we gave away for free from our website under a Creative Commons license that had no commercial terms on it.
Yeah, they had to give us attribution, but you couldn't make money off of it.
And it was a no derivatives one. So
yeah.
in this case, you can do derivatives like the CC Mixter. It's allowed to do derivatives. So here's the key. Something that we released for free on the internet became a very successful book with actual commercial worth. So anybody that tells you that if you release something under a Creative Commons license that you've destroyed its commercial value is crazy. You can do quite a bit with it, and we're kind of living proof of that.
And we do that with our songs.
We do, and we do a number of our music, we do the same thing. Now that said, the terms of a Creative Commons license is perpetual. It has to be for it to work. I'm not going to get into the details of why. And that said, you really should think about what you have under that term and which ones you don't.
And perpetual, we should define it. What that means is when you release it under Creative Commons, then it's forever released under Creative Commons. That's what I mean by that.
Delio, actually on Twitter at DT2K, said that you haven't mentioned YouTube much and wants to know if YouTube is no longer a relevant medium for the advancement of indie music.
Oh my. The exact opposite.
Yeah,
Exact opposite. Okay,
Exact opposite.
So if you can hold on to day 2.
We are going to do.
We have an entire session on just YouTube. We have articles in Electronic Musician Magazine about it. It is the best way to promote your music.
We'll just tell Delio to hang on.
Yes,
We gotta come in day 2.
hang on.
Day 2.
Alright, we'll do one more question then. This one may be addressed as well, but Alexa Lustro wants to know. She says it's hard to cultivate an image on social media from day one. A lot of us have been using it for a while before we thought about branding ourselves as musicians. How do we start branding ourselves without confusing the audience that we already have? Is this something where you need to create a whole new set of accounts for your music as opposed to your personal brand?
It's a fantastic social media question. Yeah, it's very interesting. What I'm curious about on this one is this a person who's established themselves as something else and trying to change it, or was it just I'm a person and then it's like now I'm a musician, which isn't that surprising if people know you and you've got a personal account. It's not hard to change a little tagline at the top to say musician and change the image banner at the top to show your music and to start talking about your music every once in a while. Not spamming people, but engaging and doing that kind of stuff. It's like, hey, I released a new track. It's a very natural thing when it comes out of your personal stuff. Now, if you had a social media account and you're all about theater, like I'm a theater person, doing this and this, also, well, now I'm a musician, people maybe say, well, what are you? Which is it? Although, to tell you the truth, that kind of thing should be able to cross-promote very well, and you still should be able to take it in a lot of different directions. The thing is to be authentic, and if that being a musician is part of you, you can actually take advantage of that.
That's a great question.
Well, we touched a little bit about what's coming up next, and I know we're going to talk about what to do before you leave the studio, but I think that we have 7 registrations that you need to do before releasing your music that we're going to touch on, and I thought I might give you guys the opportunity to explain exactly what that means.
Sure. Well, with this type of thing, before you actually release your music into the world, you want to be doing 7 registrations. 7 registrations to make sure that you're actually getting all of the royalties that you're owed, to make sure that it's fully copyright protected, and to actually get it out there in a way that actually will start bringing you in income. And that's something that we're going to be covering in the very next session. And just to make sure, what we tend to do is we tell you to turn these 7 registrations into a checklist to do before you even release your music into the world. But that's just one of the the many things that we're going to be covering about preparing your music. And maybe now you see, based on this, what preparing is talking about.
We've got some really great bits already coming in. I know there's a lot more to go, but I wanted to share some of the online community's comments about you guys coming in. Amber Steffi said, actually from Twitter, she said, loving this already. Jason Randy on Creative Live's new audio channel is the best. We got that. And
all right.
we also have Keith say, so music is a business and your music is your product. Oh my God, mind blown.
The interesting thing about this is it's not too well known that you actually really need to prepare your music before you leave the studio. There's a lot of things that you can do, as we say right here on the slide, to maximize your sales and licensing. If you do it the right way, your music will actually be ready and will start collecting money for you from the beginning. So that's the key question. Let's hit it. What is it that you need to do to prepare your music? Well, the best stuff you can do is before you even release it. And we actually think about this as we're planning each album that we do. This is actually something that comes to mind. The number one thing you can do, by far, and it's the thing that most musicians skip, is mastering. Now, do you guys know what mastering is? Yes, excellent. That's great to hear, because not everybody has run into it. So for those of you who are watching, if you haven't run into mastering yet, this is especially useful if you've got your own digital audio workstation, you're doing recording at home, you need to get another set of ears on it. That's probably the number one thing that mastering does.
Yeah.
But probably the best description is it's sort of the polish that goes on the final piece. I always like to say that if you were making a chair and you were a carpenter, it would be like saying, okay, this is done, and you never sanded it or varnished it at all. I mean, people sit on it, it's like, yeah, it's a chair, but there's something missing here, and they may not even know what it is. The thing is that actual fans know, but they can't explain why they know that it doesn't sound professional. So if you want to have your music go against professional music and actually match it and be just as good, you really need to master your music. It does cost money. It's definitely something that you're going to be spending a little bit of money on. In the Indie Band Survival Guide, we tell you how to minimize your time in the mastering studio, because it's one of those things where it's like you're in a taxi and you're on the little meter. You really want to get the most out of it. What it does is very hard to explain, which is probably why a lot of musicians skip it, I would say. But then once you hear the difference, you're like, I never want to release anything without mastering again. It does very targeted EQ and volume normalization. So if you have an album of music, you don't want one to be really loud and then another one to be quiet, because you want to mix down every song for what's best for the song. You don't want to do it what's best for the album. And then once you've got the internal levels set the right way, then you have all of the songs normalized to the same one. That's probably the easiest way to describe it. The type of EQ they do is not the same type as you do for mixdown. This is different. It's not even the same type you do during recording. And once they do it, it actually comes out to sound like a much more professional product. And it's something that you really need.
Which I think is very important, because your music is side by side to professional recordings. I mean, if you go to iTunes, where we're going to talk about how to get into iTunes and all that kind of stuff, like you are side by side in that store with professional mastered recordings, and there you can hear the difference as you click through. It's like it's very quiet, or it's missing some of the. It's hard to describe the gleam,
the quality, quality. Another thing that they do, which is kind of interesting for those of you who make electronic music, is that they will often route it through tube equipment, analog equipment. So you take the very harsh jagged edges that you get through digital recording and actually make a nice, smooth analog sound that actually puts it all together. That's something you want to think about. Next, WAV files. this is something that you get after the mastering process. Well, the reason why you need to have the WAV files on hand, and we recommend 16-bit 44.1 kilohertz available, is that it's useful for licensing purposes. Now, have you ever heard an MP3 that was compressed again? I mean, and we see this all the time through, let's say, YouTube videos where they take a song, and then the end result of the YouTube video, for example, is, again, compressed. It sounds terrible. Unfortunately, that reflects on you, the artist, even more so than it does on the person who licensed your music or decided to use it. I mean, even if you decide to give it away. And we have one of our songs in an award-winning documentary, which they added it to it. They're like, okay, can we license your music? We're like, okay, we worked that out. And they're like, well, we've got the MP3. We're like, no, use a WAV, use a WAV. It's like, I've already got it. It's already out. We're like, please use a WAV file.
It's a big mistake.
It's a big mistake. Start with the best quality you can. Push this on the people who are licensing your music.
Yeah, because like podcasters and YouTube video, they don't necessarily know that they should have the WAV file. They'll just take the MP3. It's very convenient. It's very easy to email, and just slap it in. Then it gets over compressed again, and then it sounds terrible. And then, like Randy said, that really reflects poorly on your own music. So it's bad for your image. And we've had that happen to us. So, like, we're speaking from experience.
A lot of these things, it's just mistakes that we've run into that we don't want you to make. Make your own damn mistakes, don't like ours. The other thing that I'll just mention before I leave this point is that you really want to put it somewhere where you can get at it, like a Dropbox account or some file sharing account, so that you can easily get at it. Because when someone licenses your music, they may need it really fast. And you don't want to be able to lose out on this. Again, it's another practical point, but we want to be able to make it easy for you to basically do licensing if these opportunities come up. So next, MP3s. You do want to have some of these handy. Certainly you want it so that you can give it away. You want it so that you can perhaps sell it from your own website, sell the downloads, everything like that. We recommend basically giveaway MP3s and high quality ones at the specifications we have in the slide. You can read it yourself. I don't need to read the slide off. But one of the key points to MP3s, this is something that a lot of people forget, and we really want to caution you not to make this mistake, is to make sure that you fill out the ID3 tags. This is a list of all of the fields that you should be filling out for ID3 every time. Now, ID3 tags. Some of you might be saying, what the heck is that thing? And it's not very clear at first, if you're first starting to get into this, what these various terminologies mean. The MP3 is the sound file. The ID3 tag is what they call metadata, and it is basically, very simply, when you go into iTunes and it lists the artist, and it lists the track name, and it lists the album, that this is where it comes from. So you might be thinking, okay, well, so what? I mean, why do I care so much? Well, tell me if this isn't the case. Don't you have something in your collection that you like the music, and you have no idea who the artist is? Yeah, so, and I'm going to look at the camera here. I'll bet you guys do too. I'll bet you it's the same thing. Yes?
So is ID3 a program, or is it actually...
Very good question. So is ID3 a program, or is it something like that? These are little bits of data attached to the MP3 file. And the way you can set it, the easiest way you can set it, is using pretty much any player that you have, any MP3 player. They all have ID3 editors. They don't call it ID3, it's just like artist info or something. They'll say like info. And they'll have all of these things in this little box. On iTunes, I think it's just called info or something like that. You can fill almost all of those out, except you guys are professionals. This ISRC code thing right here that we have, this is actually not easily settable using that. What you have to do for that is use programs like Jicose or Tag and Rename. We use Tag and Rename. It doesn't matter. I've heard of professional musicians being very happy with Jicose. These things help you, and then what you can do then is point the programs at this huge directory of music. My guess is that or you might not have as much as we do. We have some 500 songs. First of all, it's embarrassing to misspell your own name, right? And you can do that because you can type it. Well, you don't want to do it 20 times. And actually doing a multiple edit using something like iTunes is actually not very efficient. It doesn't have a good interface for it. You can do it, but then it'll try and overwrite everything. With the programs like these, you can just write the fields that you want, keep them exactly consistent. If I'm going to go back for a second. The copyright legal information is where you can actually tell people if they're interested in license. This is important because if someone's going to license it, they're going to want to know. The same thing is true of some of these comments that you can put in, where you can actually say license our music, direct them to your website, and tell them where to find you. But it goes beyond this. It's actually a way for you to get more income from both your live shows and your music, and it also connects your fans together. So here's what I mean by this. There's sites like Last.fm. And have you used that? Have you heard of it? Okay, so the cool thing about Last.fm, if you haven't used it yet and you have music out there, check it out right now, especially those of you online. It's easy for you to do it. Go ahead and search on your own name. The way it works is that you install a program on your computer. It's called a Scrobbler. That's what they call it. And it watches every song that you play. And, the next thing you might be thinking of is, why do I want the NSA to know all the music I do? It's about sharing it with your friends. It's sort of like an auto-blogging bit of software for your music, so you can just share what you play. There's lots of people that participate in this. Well, here's the cool thing. It's based on the ID3 tags. And if the ID3 tags are filled out properly with your artist info, and if you do a good job of choosing an artist name that's unique, you can actually find out who's playing your music. All these people fill out profiles. You can find out how old they are, where they're located, what else they're listening to. I mean, this is killer information for you. You can actually create an account there, which we do. It's called Big Turtle on there. Feel free to friend us. And we actually friend our fans, and then we check out the music they're listening to and get an idea about new ways to market ourselves. Because if person A is listening to us and listening to band B, well, band B's fans might be interested in our music as well. See how that works? If you don't have the ID3 tags filled out right, it will never pop up on there. And another site is eventful.com, which allows you to actually have a show calendar from the point of view of a musician. We'll be talking about this in detail in our gigs one, which I believe is day 2. Yeah, so we'll be talking about that tomorrow. But I don't want to go into detail. But as a fan who uses Eventful, what you can do is actually have it scan your music collection and find any bands that you're listening to, where they might be playing in your area. And if your ID3 tags aren't correct, you lose that connection, you lose that income, and now, again, there's one other thing. You've done all this hard work to put this music out. You've done all this hard work to actually try and get it marketed, get it into people's hands, and as we like to say, people pay you in 2 ways. One of it is money, but the other is with their attention. It's very hard to get somebody interested in your stuff, and you've done all that hard work, you've gotten your music to them, they've listened to it, and now you've provided them with absolutely no way to find you. Make sense? Yeah. So, fill out your ID3 tags.
Very important.
Very important. Next is mixes. This is another thing that you want to do while you're in the studio in order to think about your licensing. The first one should be fairly obvious. If you have any naughty words, time to make a mix that cuts it out so that you can play it on the radio, right? Makes sense. I'm sure that you don't have too many songs like that. A lot of naughty words, but if you do, the instrumental mix. Any guesses why you need that one? DJs. That's a really good one. Yeah. Also, licensing. It's useful as a bed, like we talked about when we did it for the TV show. Now that one was an instrumental song.
Yeah.
Never had any words to it. But some of the songs and melodies that you make, if all you do is just cut out all the vocals and just make a mix of just the instrumental, you might have a nice melody there that's perfectly useful for licensing purposes, right? Beyond that, it could be useful for commercials. This is the kind of thing where they're like, oh, that's perfect for my voiceover to go on top of. The next two mixes that you see here, vocals up and vocals down, that's also for commercials and other things like that. They have a TV commercial and they may want your song and they may want the words, but they want the words quieter so that they can do it. Or in the vocals up, you might be thinking, why did they want vocals up then? Well, maybe you made a song about hamburgers and then, maybe some large fast food company, which I won't specify, since we did that earlier, some fast food company wants the hamburger part like standing out, so then they use the vocals up. These are useful. You can do it ahead of time. You may as well. You're in the studio. All you have to do is change a few decibels on the track. You're all set. And then alternate versions, which we're going to actually talk about more alternate versions later. And this gets to the question that was asked earlier, which is when do you release things? Some of your demos could be perfectly useful as alternate versions, as promotions. And we'll be talking about this again, I think, a little later in the slide deck as well. So we'll be talking about that. In general, I don't recommend necessarily releasing really rough cuts unless you want your fans to be part of your process and the rough cuts aren't like super rough cuts and you're not turning them off. Then again, if your fan base is more of a musician fan base and they actually want to comment on the ongoing process that you're doing, this is where it can come in handy. Alright, so now I want to get to what we talked about before we hit the break, which is the 7 registrations you should be doing before you release your music. Which registrations you should be doing. It's surprising to us how often people skip this, even professionals. I think that it comes down to having a very structured approach to music, which is very difficult to do. I think it also comes down to the fact that they just didn't make a checklist. So what I'm going to recommend, what we recommend, is you make a checklist out of these 7 registrations, and you just check them all off before you release it. And why am I saying before you release it? We'll cover that. One thing, we're about to talk about a lot regarding copyright and music. And every time we've gotten into that topic, it could go on forever, because people seem to have tons of questions about how do I cover a song, how do I handle samples, how do I clear the rights, how do I do all kinds of things like that, right? Well, anyway, we actually could probably have another 18 hours of a course, especially this guy who's the lawyer between the two of us. We'll be happy to answer your questions about this at some point, just so you know we might need to cut it off, but we left enough time for you to ask those questions. So let's get into that. First of all, before we get into it though, this is about U.S. law. Now, Jason and I have a book called the DIY Music Manual. It's released from Random House. It's in Europe. It also has laws of Australia and New Zealand. And so we cover that. If you're interested in that, we suggest you pick up that book. It is only available in those regions of the world. So, that's the way that book distribution rights happen. So you can get that book if you have any questions about that. If you have more questions about the U.S. law one, that's the Indie Band Survival Guide. Of course, it covers it. But we're going to talk about U.S. law in this particular session. Basic copyright.
Right. So, basic. So what we're trying to do here is to get through copyright pretty quickly so we can move on to the registrations. But here are the basics that you need to know. Number 1, your music is copyrighted when you create it. Okay? So once it's fixed in a recording, or you write it down, or you write the lyrics, or whatever, in some tangible form, it's copyrighted. Okay? So you already have it. You don't have to. What we're going to talk about is registering. So registering your copyright with the U.S. Copyright Office, that gives you additional protection. Okay? So you already have the copyright, additional protection. It also gives you a third party that date stamps it. Says you created this on this date, and we're the government, and so that officially happened.
Well, it's helpful if you've got, to be clear, somebody else says, no, that's my song, and you registered it first. It doesn't always prove it. Because somebody else could sneak in and register it, and it's not theirs, you can prove it, but it makes it more likely that you'll win.
Well, it just becomes a point of fact in the court of law. Okay, so
That's the lawyer talk. See the lawyer? See that? I told you.
law talking guy. Okay, so but it also gives you other statutory protections, and that's like, well, first of all, you need to register if you want to go after somebody who's plagiarized your music. It also gives you, what do we have here? You're entitled to lawyer's fees, which is a good thing, and punitive damages, which is really telling somebody not to do that if you win. Very technical stuff. So just know that the main thing out of this is that you do have a copyright once you fix it in some tangible form. You do this every day. We've done it over 500 times with music, and then every demo was copyrighted and all that other kind of stuff. It's just about registering. Okay? Now, moving to the next.
Well, before I do, just one key point. You want to do it within 3 months of public release. So if you release it, you have 3 months grace period. Don't wait for that. Do this stuff before you release it. Right? That said, this is another thing that doesn't make sense to musicians, and part of it is it has to do with how copyright law grew up. And if you're interested in that as a topic, I'll just give you a book and then move on. Because it's the only thing it only makes sense, right? The book that I like on this topic is called, it's by Lawrence Lessig.
Oh yeah,
it's called Free Culture. Free Culture. And it talks about the history of copyright as it relates to music. It's crazy. I'm just going to leave that on the table and say, check that out if you're interested in it. It's a great book. That said, there are 2 copyrights for your music. Like you just recorded a new original song, and by original, I don't mean that it's good. I just mean that it's yours. Right? Right? So it's your song, you hit record, you hit stop. Now congratulations, you have 2 copyrights. The one that most people are aware of is this composition copyright. It's the song, but it's the least concrete thing about this whole thing because it can be covered 8 million times, and it's still one copyright. The sound recording is a whole separate copyright. And each sound recording that you make, that means if you make a new remix, that means if you record it and then release it, then record it again and release it, those are separate sound recordings. And the amazing thing is, basically, as it comes to this, each of these have different lives when it comes to royalties and licensing. That's the part that we're getting at, because we're here making money with music, right? Now, the record labels were the ones who normally owned the sound recordings. Songwriters normally own the composition copyrights. There's a whole different set of rights with each of them, and the interesting thing is, my guess is, the label in this case is you. It's you. You own it. And in fact, you're going to see this over and over again. You're going to see these weird things where the way it works in the music world is that this is one party, and this is another party, and this is another party, and you become this schizophrenic thing because they're all you. And therefore, you have to do all these registrations. So that's registrations 1 and 2. You register the song composition at the U.S. Copyright Office, which is copyright.gov, and register the sound recording at the Copyright Office. Again, you want to do it within 3 months of publication. And in order to do it, and if it's the exact same copyright owner, you have a much easier time doing this. From Form PA, which is a Performing Arts Registration, that's the one you do for the composition, or SR, which is the sound recording, you can do one, other, or both. And you'll have to go up there to decide that. One key thing is that registration and the copyright owners. If you're wondering who the copyright owner is or how you should track that, we cover this in the Indie Band Survival Guide. I wish we could go into it, but we can't talk about split sheets and a lot of things like that. We have resources at indieguide.com for this kind of thing, /music, indieguide.com/music if you're interested. And in the book, in the Your Rights chapter, we actually have this covered.
You really need to track who owns what, though, before you go in the recording studio. That's as much as I can say about it. That is to say, you determine ahead of time who owns the sound recording and who owns what percentage of each PA, each song composition. Yes?
Copywriting our demos that we hand out for free, or should we be copywriting only the music that we want to sell?
So I get what you're saying. The question is about registering the copyright. So
Yeah.
your demos are copyrighted.
Okay.
So keep that in mind. So that's good.
Okay.
It's just whether you want to register it. And look, this costs money to register. So we haven't registered everything.
No. Not out of our 500 songs, it's a not a,
And we certainly haven't registered demos.
Yeah.
We've picked and chosen which ones that we wanted to register. And we have used in some aspects these money saving techniques, like where everything aligned for the owners are the same and save some money that way. But it can add up. It can add up.
And so we tend to let the world tell us when we need to spend money on something.
Yeah.
That's actually one way of us making money with music thing. We're going to talk about some things that cost money. As we said at the beginning, we're going to tell you a lot of ways that are free. Those you should just do. They're time. But if you make it into a checklist, there's a lot of things you can just spend one whole weekend, set it aside, register, sign up for this website, that one, do this. All that stuff, you're going to be able to do it. As soon as it comes to actually spending money, you want to see if the world's going to do it. Now, if you're not like us and crazy and trying to do 365 songs in a year, and you release just like one album a year, just register it. That's not much. It's like $35 right now, I think, to 40. They change it, so it's hard to keep track of it. It's not that much money. No. Okay, so one of the key things, which isn't on the slide, I realize, is that you can register songs as a compilation. Now, this is a key thing. You might think that what I'm trying to say right here is that you're registering songs as a compilation, that it has to be an album. The government doesn't care if you release it as an album. It's just a group of songs. So if you're going to release 20 singles, you can actually, I don't know what the limit is on this site, but you can just make it into a compilation and then release them separately, and they're all copyrighted. You've registered the copyright. Be careful with that. Once you do that, you're in good shape. So it depends on what you're trying to do. So, that was 1 and 2. We've now registered it with the Copyright Office. Now we're going to start making royalties off the copyrights that you own. It is literally something that you own. That's the way they've always put it, right? So it's something that you can assign to somebody else, like you own it now, and you pay me money, and it's your property. Or you can pass it on to your children or whatever you want. It's actually something that part of your estate, and you can put it in your will. Put it in your will.
And you can bequeath your music to your grandchildren. Isn't that great?
And the copyright lasts an awful long time. We don't really have a lot of those details on here because we didn't want to cover it, but it's 75 years.
Yeah, it's a while.
70, it's a while. It's after your death. So your entire lifespan plus like another 70, 75 years. And so that means your great-great-great-grandchildren in their flying cars will still own the song. That song that you wrote last night while you were drunk. Hey, it's how the copyright law works. What are we going to do? So, let's say it was a song that's going to make you some money off of radio and TV stations and all that kind of stuff. You can distribute royalties to the copyright owners. And they're based on surveys, basically. Now, when you look at this, it's based on basically when each of these copyrighted works are performed. Again, I'm trying to say this very publicly. And I'm trying to say this very carefully.
Because there's a lawyer sitting next to you.
Yes, well, this is why it always kills the party.
Yes.
There's 3 composition-based, this is the Form PA, composition-based performance rights organizations. So when it comes down to that, there's ASCAP, BMI, and CSAC. CSAC is a little distinct from the other 2 in that you can't just join it, you actually have to be invited to it, is how that works. ASCAP and BMI, you can join, I think it's $50 for each of them if you want to do it. You just join once, it's a lifetime membership fee, and you're all set. Considering that that's the case,
Oh yeah, there's a couple others that we should probably mention. If you're in Canada, it's called SOCAN. And if any of you make worship music, then there's another one. We have it listed in the Event Survival Guide, and I never can remember its name. I don't know why. Do you remember?
No, I don't.
Okay, so none of us, but I remember.
You can never remember.
I know that I can never remember it. That's
And every country has their own performance rights organization.
Right, so if you're elsewhere in the world, we have them listed in the DIY Music Manual. If you're in Europe or anything like that, there's just different ones all over the place. The ones in the US, you really only have to join one of these, but the key thing here is that you have to register twice with these guys. So, royalties are split between two roles, the songwriter and the publisher. What the heck do I mean by that? Well, the publisher is somebody who basically promotes the song's use in licensing opportunities. So you're not only trying to get licensing, you're trying to get it played as often as possible to generate the royalties. Each time your song is played on the radio, for example, you're supposed to get like 9.1 cents every time it's played. You want to have that happen an awful lot to have it actually add up to something. You need to do that a lot to get caught up. Remember I mentioned there were surveys that they do? You want to do that. Well, normally publishers in the old industry was this separate role, and you, the songwriter, would say, oh good, I write songs, I want to have you promote the songs, and they would actually assign that. But in today's music industry, you're the publisher too. Congratulations. So you're entitled to both royalties. And the key thing here is that you register each song twice. Once as the songwriter and once as the publisher. And this was it the Grant? Yeah, Grant.
Throwing Toasters.
Throwing Toasters, right?
Great story. So he knew about this. So we were interviewing him, and we're at, I forget, some restaurant or something, and we were interviewing him, and he had music played on, I can't remember, TV or radio or something. One of his songs got played a lot. And he told the story of how he got a check from, I think it was ASCAP.
Yeah, it was ASCAP.
He got a check, he opens it up, he looks at it, it's $1,000.
Awesome.
$1,000 check for his music being performed out there through radio or TV. But that was just the first part. Then the next day, he gets another letter from ASCAP, and he opens that up, and it's like, it's $1,000 again. He knew to register as both the songwriter and the publisher. The first check was for him as the songwriter of the song. The second check for $1,000 was the publisher of the song. Because of that, he actually made twice his money. And what we keep finding out is that a lot of musicians don't register.
A lot of people think of themselves as
just the songwriter, and they ignore the publisher part of it. But to ignore the publisher part of it is to actually leave money on the table. This is about making money with music. Don't do that. You just have to fill out the right forms online.
So just, go ahead.
You do both those registrations through any one of those websites?
Correct.
For those companies?
Now, there's some confusing details about it that I'm just going to throw into your head. Again, I have to refer you to more detailed resources. But number one, you register twice with the organization as a songwriter and as a publisher, as a business entity.
Yeah.
And then you register the song, each song you do, with each of those entities. Does that make sense? Like you register with ASCAP and say, I'm a songwriter. You register with ASCAP again, it's like, I'm a publisher. Yeah. And then each time you do it, you do this twice. Here's another confusing thing. Let's say I'm with ASCAP, I happen to be with ASCAP. Let's say you're with BMI. We can't register the same song with both. And so if we want to do this royalty thing right, and I'm supposed to get part of that check, I really should register with BMI. But these companies only let you, as a business entity, register with one. Which means that if you are really, you get really big and really serious about this, and some of you online might be really advanced. If you are, you literally have to create 3 different business legal entities, different LLCs or partnerships or separate, something that the business recognizes, and then you can use that. They tend to register with all 3 because they don't know which songwriters they're going to work with. And then you register each song depending on whoever wins the coin flip or whatever when you're trying to figure this stuff out. Again, I wish I could get into this more, but does that make sense, at least at a high level? And hopefully you have the resources to be able to look this up.
again, as we talked about, it's more of an intermediate course. It's something after you get a little bit established. But you can read about this, you can do it, you can set it up and go.
Yeah, and I think the main point is that you can get 2 checks. I think everybody can understand that.
And actually, one of the things that you'll find out is that as a more independent musician, depending on what you've got going on, it's a little harder to get caught up in their surveys. Certainly the large labels have a lot more pull when it comes to getting money out of these organizations. They have the connections, they also are getting played far, far more often. So you might be like, woohoo, I got played on the radio, and then you get that little check at the end of the quarter, end of the half of the year, which is like, sorry, your songs were never picked up in any surveys. Little letter you get at the end. You're like, wait a minute, I know I was played. And if you are, some of the pros have programs. Again, another money-making tip here. You want to check out, for example, with ASCAP, ASCAP Plus. We took advantage of that, right?
Yes. So again, like, as an independent musician who's not getting played ad nauseum on the radio, like he said, you will know where you've been played, or you should know where you've been played. We knew, going back to our story of the licensing music and writing a theme song for the TV show, we knew we were played at 26 million homes. We had proof that it was played, that the TV show was played in those homes. And then we got the letter from ASCAP that said, sorry, not caught up in any surveys. So what did we do? We knew that they have this other catch-all program called ASCAP Plus, and it's you actually go to them, you write them with the proof, you fill out a form, and you say, okay, we were played on such and such a date. Here's all our proof for it, and then they review it, and they have a process in which they review that. And okay, it wasn't caught up in the surveys, but it goes through this panel. I think it's the panel that goes through it, and then they will issue a check based on, they'll do their research on it as well. So it's a good thing to be aware of that these things have programs that, in case you're not caught in these surveys, that you should be aware of if you get played. Okay.
That's all we had on the composition pros. Remember, I said this was hooked on the Form PA, the composition copyright. When your sound recording is actually performed, played in public, you're also entitled to royalties. Now, here's the funny thing with this. You would think that both of them are getting played on commercial terrestrial radio. And they are. They're both getting played. But back in the earliest days of radio, they made the determination, Congress did actually, that the only one who's going to get compensated in the United States for this are the songwriters. The actual people who own the sound recording don't get paid for play on terrestrial radio. So it only generates it on one. In Europe, they both are true. And so they really have actually a very different situation. It generates 2 royalties. So what are we talking about here? Most people are less familiar with it because terrestrial radio used to be and television and all that stuff. It used to be the game in town when it came to generating royalties for your music. It was the game in town. And now it's not the only thing, because once these streaming services started to pop up on the internet, there was a lot of lobbying that went on, and finally some laws passed that basically set certain rates for whenever songs are played on streaming services. Now, probably you're thinking right now, what's a streaming service compared to something else? It's not very clear. The easiest way you can tell is, can you hit replay? It's not a streaming service. Can you hit rewind? Not a streaming service. If it's the kind of thing where it's radio and it's like, wow, that was a great song, and now I can't listen to it again unless I find it, streaming service. That means Spotify, not a streaming service. Pandora, yes. Last.fm, yes, streaming. Satellite radio as well. So, the thing is, most of these are computer-based companies, and so they're able to track the royalties very clearly and very well. So it comes out very simply. You need to register with Sound Exchange. Now, this time it's not so confusing. There's only one in the United States, Sound Exchange. You only have to register once with the organization. But royalties are split again. This time between the people who own the sound recordings, who remember in the past used to be the music labels, and now it's probably you, and the other is between the featured performers and the producer. So the thing about the way the music industry worked in the past, you might find this interesting, is that the only thing that really mattered, the only thing that generated any significant royalties was the composition. And sometimes in these really famous bands, there was only one band member that would actually be listed as the composition owner. And some of the biggest, bitterest band splits happen because that one person got all the money and the others, as a performer, didn't get any royalties. So, this is one of the times where the actual performers are actually getting something. And it's something that you can tell to all the people who are playing in your music. That said, a lot of the artists out there, you're probably singer-songwriters or whatever it is that you say, electronic something songwriters. I'm a sax player-songwriter personally, but I mean, whatever you are, you're everything. You're doing all of this stuff. And considering that, you actually want to register as the featured performer yourself and the producer. And this gets split, of course, between all of this stuff. So, again, let me just get back to the slide in a second. You need to register twice. That's what all that means. And again, this is the type of thing where people forget and they only register once. Don't make that mistake. Don't leave one check on the table. Now, here's the crazy thing. If you've got music out there, they may have money for you already because they track song plays whether you've registered the song or not. And that's because it's electronic recording. It's not the same as the surveys where they're just looking for a song that they know has been registered. They know that, that actually your song has been played. Considering that, check out their searchable database, place database. These are clickable links, which doesn't do you much good if you're watching. I know, sorry. But all you have to do is go to Sound Exchange and try it out. Okay, now, like you said, we register this twice, but there's one other registration. We're up to 6 now. We said there'd be 7 registrations you should do. The 7th one is something called an ISRC code. The ISRC code is like a digital fingerprint. It actually tells the recording agencies, this is what the song sounds like, digital fingerprint, and it picks it up. And if you've got the ISRC code, it actually is more likely that Sound Exchange will find out when your song is being played on any streaming service. So, you can go to usisrc.org and sign up as an organization, which costs you money. There's a lot of organizations that will charge you to make them, and very often your either mastering house or if you do CD duplication run, they often include making an ISRC code as part of their services. So there's multiple ways to do this. And this is the kind of detail we list in the Indie Band Survival Guide. You can see that broken down. I wish I could spend time on all these things, but looking at the time, we've just got all this material to get through. I'm just going to remind you when you do this, once you've gotten through all of these 7, that's your checklist. You're going to actually be in the best position then to get all the royalties that you're owed when this music that you've worked so hard on has been put together. So, before I leave these 7, I wanted to leave a little bit of space to answer any questions, both online and in the room.
And what if you have a song that's been out for a while, didn't have an ISRC code for it? Is it still possible to go out and...
Let me answer that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right, I like to that.
The nice thing is, with ISRC codes, you can do it anytime, even if you've got music that's out there. It's not a problem. In fact, they specify it. Go to usisrc.org. They've got a nice FAQ section, frequently asked questions, part of their website. I really recommend checking it out. Any other questions?
There's a question here from Hannah who says, do you have to set up a company to be a publisher? And if so, how do you set it up as a business entity?
That's a very good, Jason.
Yeah, that's the part that we talked about in the first lesson, that you do need a tax ID. You do need to be a company. You can be a sole proprietorship, I believe.
Well, that's the key thing is the sole proprietorship is the law talking guy way of saying you can just do business under your own name. Congratulations, you've got a business.
business. So no, you don't have to, but finish the thought.
What was my thought?
I think it was something about you can then register with the government and make a separate entity.
Yes, you can do all that kind of stuff. And yes, you should do these things. The answer for this, because I have so much material to go through, is we talk about it in the book. You should talk to an accountant. If you're really serious about this stuff, then talk to an accountant. An accountant will not steer you wrong. Or use your networks to find out who you might know. But they can actually walk you through your personal facts about setting up a company for yourself.
Tessa asked, in regards to ID3 tags, if there's 3 people involved, a songwriter and 2 singers, are they uploading music to, who are uploading music to these sites? Do they need 3 separate tags for each person?
That's a good question, and you can't. The tags don't stack like that. You only have one artist tag, one title, one album. And so the reason, what the major industry does is they create a new artist name for that kind of thing. Now, keep in mind that the ID3 tags are more to help your marketing and to connect your fans to your music, not as much to connect the royalties directly to your music. That's the ISRC code. And then the ISRC code makes it more likely for the Sound Exchange organization to do it, and if they're separate featured performers and they register properly, everybody can get paid.
So in terms of getting funneling their fans to them, they would just want it to go to one place that represents their band.
Yes.
Okay.
One place that represents, and this becomes a marketing thing. It is expensive to set up a new name each time because that's a new brand you're putting together. We'll be talking about brand tomorrow morning. We'll talk about that. But you generally would want to say that it's artists that's already established with a guest performer. Might be a good way to do it. So let's move on to how do we make sure music sales are charted by music authorities and SoundScan. What does this directly have to do with income? Well, first of all, obviously, if you're charting, you've got a heck of a thing to use to market it, and for PR as well. So it's directly related for that. SoundScan also tracks sales. And so this kind of thing can be very useful inside the industry to prove that you have a very viable product out there. So how do you ensure it's chartable? Most people don't know this, but even though you don't have a CD anymore a lot of times, a lot of bands don't do it, you need a barcode. That's how they do it. So you can get a barcode very easily, actually, by going to, usually your CD duplicators can actually sell them to you. You can buy them online. We have actually a bunch of resources in the Indie Band Survival Guide about it, like where to get it. The key thing with it is that you need it in advance during the design phase of your album making process, because it is part of the album art. That just doesn't make sense. I mean, you don't often think of that, but it's actually the kind of thing that slowed us up, because we were already done with the back cover, we'd already sent it in, and now we have this EPS file that has the barcode in it. We have to stick it back on the thing. This matters. We have an album out there, our first one, that was in dispute with another album. Ours was first, but then they knocked us out of Amazon.
That's just because the barcode itself got confused.
Yeah, and
that could always happen.
It was the authority. So this kind of thing is, we're telling you like a business point here. Just get this. This is another thing for your checklist. You're releasing a new album. Get a barcode, especially if you're interested in charting. Right? Now, another aspect. How do you make sure that your artist name and track listing appears automatically? You ever pop your CD in and just see all the tracks come in? That comes from something called Gracenote. Also something called FreeDB. You can enter your information there. There's a lot of ways to do it. Again, your CD duplication houses will often do that for you. So there is actually something to be said to do like a run of CDs, because you get a lot of other services. You can get a barcode, you can get
SRC code so you can get this taken care of the right way. The key thing with this is having all of that stuff spelled right. Now, why is this important in the age of basically ripping CDs? Well, those MP3s with the ID3 tags in them, those ID3 tags get filled out based on this. So you need to get it done ahead of time. This is another thing you do before you release your music. And GraceNote.com actually has a little fact page on their page which tells you exactly how to do this using things like iTunes. You'll be typing in all the track names. Yes, you want to make sure that you spell everything right, double check it, because once you hit submit, it's going to go to this big database in the sky that everybody else who's got your CD will get the names and everything else on it. This is a question that we get quite often, as you can imagine. It's something that comes up quite a bit. How do you convince fans to buy your music that you're releasing for free, after all? And to tell you the truth, it is something that's a bit of a conundrum, because the thing that you're selling is the thing that you have to give out to convince people to buy the thing that you're selling. And then by the time you've given it to them, then why the heck are they going to pay for it? Right? I mean, it doesn't make any sense. Well, we're going to give you a few methods. We actually wrote an Electronic Musician article about this that just came out not too long ago. But we've also given it quite a bit of thought. There's a lot of things that you can do around this problem. Although I want to refer you back to our first session today. For those of you who weren't here from there, we have something as a concept called sell atoms, not bits. You don't just want to sell your music, and we'll be talking about merchandise. We'll be talking about a lot of ways to make money off of all kinds of aspects of your music business. Royalties is partially what we're covering here, but doesn't get affected if people take your music. And in fact, may make it more popular, more likely that it gets played so you get more royalties, right? That said, let's talk about how not to affect your digital music sales. These 5 are probably your best bets. And that's not to say that these are it. But let's dig into each one separately. Streaming services. Use a streaming service, allow them to hear the song, but not download the song. Now, there's plenty out there. There's things like Reverb Nation, SoundCloud will let you do it, and it just has an option. Let people download the song, yes or no. You just say no. Can they still steal it? Yeah, you bet. I mean, if the music can be played, it can be basically pulled off of there and taken. It's very easy. But if you raise the bar just enough, so it's more of a pain in the rear end to do it than it is to pay the damn 99 cents, then they'll pay the damn 99 cents, especially if you can make it super easy with the big buy button right next to it, then it's simple. Most people already have their credit card with Apple, which should scare everybody a lot. Right? I mean, and they're the largest place in the world where people are basically buying music. If you can send people there, they've already got their credit card, they don't have to re-enter it. It's just a buy, and then they go to that little page, buy, they'll have the song. Nice and simple. Right? So, that's the way to think about it. We just talked about this. YouTube. YouTube is actually somewhat of a streaming service for the most part, because there's ways to download the video, but then you don't have the audio. Then again, those of you who are more savvy will recognize immediately that there are websites that will accept any YouTube URL and pop out an MP3. Now, is the sound quality any good? No. It's pretty terrible. It's really awful, unfortunately. Do you think people care? No. You might care. You're musicians, right? But I'm sorry, your fans don't know. And they're happy they've got a song, and some of them might care, but it's not going to be a huge percentage. So, how can you ensure that actually, once you have it on YouTube, that they just won't pop it out? I'm going to have to say, wait, because we have an entire session on just video, and we cover this as a question. But I'm just going to have to tell you to wait on that one. YouTube is an excellent place for you to get your music out, though. Providing song samples should be obvious. You just have a snippet. The upside is that it doesn't directly cannibalize sales. Downside, no one's going to really it's not going to go viral probably. People don't virally. Here's a great song snippet I heard. I mean, it just don't do it, right? Can you imagine? Doesn't happen. Not as viral. Sorry, it doesn't work. Audio bumpers. You add an audio tag at the beginning of the song or the end of the song, and conclude maybe with a statement on where they can buy it, just to let them know, look, this thing that I gave away and downloaded is still available for sale, and gee, you should, throw me some money. The main thing is, don't make the audio of the free track the same as the audio of the track that they're going to buy. And we did this for our Song of the Day project.
That's true. We had an audio bumper in the beginning of the Song of the Day. So every song had this bumper, like a jingle that lasted 3 seconds.
Yeah.
And then the song would come on. Yeah. And then, of course, what we made for sale is just the pure song without the bumper.
So basically, the song became advertising. People ended up liking the bumper. And it made sense, too, in context of Song of the Day. Because it was a podcast. It was podcasted automatically. And people loved that because every morning there was a new song just waiting for them from us. It's just a really good way to do it. It made sense. Doesn't make sense for all types of things that you would do. The final one is alternate versions. You can release free alternate versions of the song, but again, you're not selling the same thing that you're intending to sell. You're not selling the same thing you're intending to give away. That's what I meant. So here's a list. I'm just going to blast out a whole list at you. There's a whole bunch of ideas. Now, this finally gets to the question that we were asked, I don't know, an hour ago or so, hour and a half ago. It's like, well, what should I do with my demo versions? This is where you can use it in order to generate interest in something that's coming out. Will it cannibalize sales? I don't know. I mean, it depends on how rough it is and whether you feel comfortable releasing it. Acoustic unplugged versions, live, a cappella, certainly instrumentals, outtakes. Making of, weren't you talking about that the other day?
Yeah, the making of is like, you've seen this maybe on Spotify or iTunes where the artist talks over the song and explains like what they were thinking and all that kind of stuff. That's just that version.
And then stems. Now, those of you who might not do remixing might not know what stems means. Stems are just the little bits of tracks that people can use to remix on their own. You can also do source tracks. All of these things can be useful. We talked about this last session. People like Brad Sucks released all of his source tracks that actually got people even more involved in the music and tied in. So we've covered an awful lot of stuff here. There's even more about music. There's certainly a lot more about copyright and everything else. But the key thing is, these are two ones that you might find very interesting, ways to collaborate with people. There's also a lot on copyright. There's certainly a lot on, there could be a lot more that you might want to dive into on how to register your music in different places. But these are the key ones that are tied directly to making money with music. And I wanted to make sure to leave on this one. And finally, we have an electronic musician article about convincing fans to buy music that you give away and also mixing your music for licensing. 6 versions you should be making of each song. We talked about that earlier on. These are all articles that are part of the materials that you get if you enroll. So they're available to you if you guys enroll in the course. And I wanted to make sure to leave enough room, like I said, for questions, considering this is a very detailed set of topics. I assume there's a lot queued up based on this.
Yes,
we know.
Lots of questions.
Yeah, and some of these, again, you may be getting to later. Some of these touched on some of the software you mentioned. For instance, Keith wants to know a little bit more about CD Baby. He says, can't you license songs through CD Baby? I thought you paid the copyright when you submitted the album to them. Is that true?
Paid the copyright when you submitted to them.
I think there might be some topics that are mixed into that. So they do have some licensing options. A lot of companies do. They'll help you license it. And their whole goal is to try and connect you with potential licensees. Now, we didn't talk about that a lot in detail here, but we can talk about it just a little bit. This is a basic, well, we're going to talk about it next session, aren't we? Basically, how to do
So
something.
I'm just trying to tease out trying to understand the question because, again, it was about copyright. Right, about the idea of paying CD Baby to get the copyright. So number one, it's copyrighted before, once you create it. So there wouldn't be any copyright there.
But
we
Rich also
register it with the Copyright Office.
But that's the U.S. government.
That's the U.S. government. Now, maybe maybe has a service that says we'll also do that as an added value or some sort of thing, and that might be part of it. And then the other one I think that Randy's getting at is that they also have some sort of sync licensing and some other things that do involve copyright that you can pay them and they'll help you out with it. But it could be any one of those three things.
Right. We had a couple other questions come in terms of the capital you need to do all these registrations and what you should prepare yourself for in order to do that. And Kenza had asked how much money all of these registrations cost, and Keith had followed with, what do you need in terms of capital for all these copyright purposes if you're unsigned?
Yeah, I think for now, yeah. But again, you don't have to do, with the copyright stuff, you don't have to register all of them. And that's a big one. Okay.
And I know that you mentioned YouTube, and we had a little discussion in the chat room. YouTube versus Vimeo. A lot of people saying the audio quality on Vimeo is better, it makes it look more credible.
Certainly does.
Any thoughts on Vimeo?
That's a very good point.
We'll talk about
Audio quality.
Yeah,
definitely. So that's a very good point on that. But
reminds me of last night's discussion.
yes, right, exactly.
The Grammy Association, what they're trying to do with sound quality. It's interesting.
Yeah, they're trying. I think all of the video services are actually trying to improve audio quality. Sorry, another point on that.
There's
which one should you go to?
Yeah,
I think that's where it's
In
going.
the chat room, there are a lot of people who prefer Vimeo over YouTube, but I know that you mentioned YouTube being kind of the great tool because it's more widely.
So look, you can do both. Okay. And we have this concept called, go where the party's at. So you want to go where everybody is, and a lot of that is at YouTube at the moment. And but Vimeo, I do understand with the high quality and what they're catering to and all that kind of
They have
stuff.
some other features, I believe.
Yeah,
It's very
exactly.
flexible.
And we'll talk about those.
Licensing programs. They have other premium programs that YouTube doesn't have. We'll talk about them. We've talked about a little bit about networking, getting started. We've talked about how to prepare your music to get it out there. It's time to get it out there. It's time to get to the heart of the question. This is a question we get more often than you would think. How do I get my music up on iTunes? Not every musician actually knows how to do that, but of the ones that do, there's actually a lot of gotchas, and there's a lot of things that you can do from a marketing standpoint in putting this together to make it work as well as you can, get the most amount of income from it. There's also a lot of other ways to make money with music in this zone. We're going to be talking about royalties, licensing, a bunch of other topics. But for now, I want to start with digital distribution. So, here's the thing. iTunes, they don't want to deal with us filthy musicians. They don't want anything to do with us. Having a nightmare of having to try and collect all the royalties from everything and handling each one and handling the calls from them when there's a question is not where they want to be. They're a business to business setup. So what that means is you need to work with a middleman that will actually get you on to all of these different places. And that's where this comes in. They're called digital aggregators. The name's not too important. What is important is this, that they have two revenue models that they pay out. This is now. They may come up with a new one in the future. These are the ones we've seen so far. I want you to keep an eye out for it, because considering how this music business goes, someone might come up with something new in the future. But I want to remind you of something that we talked about right at the beginning, the very first course. We have three concepts. The customer, that's what drives the sales or where your marketing is going to be targeted at. The middleman, which is actually the one that collects the money and pays you, and you. Now, the you part is just what tax ID you're putting in. It has to do with your internal business. The customer, we're going to be talking about that tomorrow. So we're going to leave that for tomorrow, and actually a little bit even on day 3. But the middleman is the one that we're dealing with now. This is where you need to understand these two initiation fee. You pay a subscription fee every year, and then you keep all the revenue from digital distributors. And by digital distributors, I'm talking about iTunes of the world. I'm talking about the Amazons of the world. So whatever they pay after taking their cut, you get all of it. The other model is a percentage model where you pay an initiation fee, but you don't have to pay a subscription every year, right? But then they take a percentage of every single transaction. It can be up to 15%, 9 to 15% usually is what I've seen to date. So probably the next question that's going on in your head is which one is best for me? Now there's ups and downs for each of them, but the key thing is that most aggregators only offer one revenue model, so you have to choose the right one. There is an exception, RouteNote. And RouteNote not only has the advantage of being free to join, so you can get your music up on iTunes for free using this service. But once you can do it, they'll take the larger percentage cut out of every sale, but then you can turn around and pay them that subscription, and then you get to keep all the money that comes out of iTunes and all the rest. So what you can do with this, which is kind of clever, is you can start out with zero money up front, get your music out there, let it build up enough revenue to pay for the subscription, and then you're still doing it entirely based on money that you've made from your music, nothing out of pocket. That said, out of the two models, generally, the way that you choose the right one to do out of these two is if you have enough sales, if you have a fair amount of sales every year, the more sales you have, the more it makes sense to do the subscription model. Now, TuneCore is a good representative example of this. CD Baby is a good representative example of this one. These aren't the only ones. There's quite a few services. They seem to be popping up all the time. There's plenty of them. Lots of options for it. We're just giving you a general representative example, and we're telling you to look out for these revenue models and decide which one will work for you. That said, aggregators can actually get you into more stores than just iTunes. It actually gets into Spotify, it gets you into RDIO, and then Shazam, which is an interesting thing. Have you guys heard of Shazam? Right. What you may not know about Shazam is that I think it's up to 1 of 14 iTunes sales comes out of that application. 1 of 14. Now think of how many sales that iTunes has going on. This is a big deal. You really want to be in this. The way that you get into them is to participate in a digital aggregator. Does that make sense? All right. That's why this is one of the key earlier steps. But we talked about prepping the music, but now the music's ready to go. We stopped just short of, okay, now I'm going to have it for sale. Now we're going to put it out there for sale. You need to choose your digital aggregator. Now, the key is the more places that you're in, the subscription aggregators usually charge more to get you into more stores. Whereas the ones that take a percentage have every incentive to get your music out far and wide. And so you pay, like CD Baby, one fee, and you go everywhere. You get in far more. So it's also a question of how you do your marketing and where you think your fans are. A lot of people will focus on iTunes and the main ones. That's fair. And that may work for you, in which case the subscription model might be A-okay. Or maybe, if you're quite a popular artist, it's not that much more to pay for the extra. Just evaluate it based on what actual income you expect to get. Start small and widen it later. Let the world tell you basically how to do it. Make sense? Right. Okay. So a few gotchas though. First of all, you need to declare explicit content so that they can know what they're selling. Number two, and this is something that not too many people seem to be aware of lately, is that iTunes, and it's been a few years now, disallows URLs in the album art. They're not going to let your album art basically advertise for some other website that they don't control. That's the way they think about it. It even does the same things on iTunes itself. Like, it will look for something that looks like a URL and may not display it. So what does that mean? Well, when you make your album art, you need to make sure that your album art doesn't have URLs in it. You also need to sign a release to clear all of your rights. That's complicated, and not just for the music, but also for the art.
You do not want your music taken down after you have it up already and you've done all that work just because you didn't clear things right. This is another thing that we get questions about all the time. It's a legal matter. It's very complicated. And it's definitely something that we cover in the Indie Band Survival Guide in more detail if you want to know how to do it. Your safest bet, of course, is to just use your own art, use your own music. Using cover songs is distinct. Using samples is distinct again. Like all these things can affect it, right? Okay. So that's one set of things. That's just digital distributors. Next, we're going to talk about direct-to-fan platforms. Now, the key with this one is there's one less middleman. Think of iTunes. Fan, iTunes, digital aggregator, you have two in between. This one shrinks it down to just one middleman, less cuts getting taken out, more profits, right? So you've got places like Bandcamp and ReverbNation, Nimbit, even CD Baby sells direct as well. You can send people to that. You get the most percentage out of the whole thing. Each one of them offers different pricing. Each one of them has different options. You have to evaluate this yourself, and this is why it's worth to spend at least a weekend researching and deciding which one's good for you. It's actually pretty important. There's also extra options on some of these platforms. This one's particularly clever. It's something that can give you some really good ideas. It's called Music for Good. It's with ReverbNation. They boost the price up to $149 a track instead of 99 cents. But then after, they take a little transaction fee, and then half the money goes to a charity. What does this mean? Well, I mean, it might make your fans a little more likely to actually buy the track if they know that it's going to be benefiting their favorite charity. They give you a list of their charity list. It's not like you can do anybody. It has to be one that they deal with. But it's quite a large list of charities. There's an option you might not be aware of. The nice thing about this is, from a marketing standpoint, those charities actually help boost your name, is how it works. Because otherwise, if they've never heard of you as an artist, then they'd be more likely to buy your song just because they like the charity, right? That's how that kind of thing works. There are some direct-to-fan gotchas. Here we go again. Consumers on the internet are less likely to use payment systems that they've never used before. Basically, if you're asking them to enter their credit card, if you're asking them to enter their address, their name, and all that stuff, and they don't know who it is, they're nervous about entering that stuff in a new store. So what it means is, unfortunately, like the largest stores, they win because they've already got the relationship. We talked about this a little bit in the last session. They already have your credit card, you just click buy, and you might type in your password and you're done. The entire sale is complete. So what we suggest is that you still want to be in iTunes even if these other stores give you a higher margin. So we've seen some musicians say, hey, buy it from here, like buy it from Bandcamp or buy it from ReverbNation. And that's great because they get a few more cents, but you might lose the entire sale if you send somebody there and don't give them the option to buy on iTunes. Our recommendation is to flip that script around, and instead of doing it, you start with iTunes because it's the most likely place people are going to buy it. There's another concept that we're going to talk about a little bit in the marketing classes, which is the easiest way to market is to actually be easy to do business with. I know that seems like counterintuitive, but people, if you think about it, it's the reason why convenience stores can charge more money for what they do, because they're easy. They're there, you get the few items you need, you walk out. If you can be easy to do business with, then you can make it work. And that means that your buy link should be right next to the music, and it just should say buy. You don't bury the lead, you don't put it 3 pages down, you don't have tons of text that explains why it's so cool, because reading the text isn't what sells it, it's buying it. It's just give them a sample and just buy the stupid thing, right? Anyway, considering that's the case, here's some direct download sales solutions. Shopify. Squarespace allows you to upload music, just take payments, handle the digital download. So that's probably about the best cut that you'll ever get. But of course, if you do that, then you're in a position where it's another credit card thing. You also have to deal with the store. Like when the store breaks, they're going to give you a call. They're not going to give iTunes a call because they didn't get the song.
that's the thing to remember with this kind of thing. Open source music solutions, if you're like a techie guy like me, Cash Music is cool because they have a whole online store, digital downloads, digital download cards, all kinds of stuff all tied to it based on their platform. And there's WordPress. If you have a WordPress-based site, you can just throw in a plugin and start handling digital download sales. Probably plugging in something like PayPal to handle payments. All of these are options for what you're trying to sell with your music. We're going to talk about marketing now, but I wanted to stop and pause just briefly at this point, because this has a lot to do with how you're selling your music. I just wanted to see if you had any questions.
Well, we have one right here.
Yeah. Are there too many ways that if you just put too many options out there, can that confuse your fans?
That is an excellent question. There are too many ways, and one of the things, there's a number of books on this topic in the business zone. One of them is called The Paradox of Choice. Another one, like I said, The Secrets of Word of Mouth Marketing. I can't think of the author's name at the moment. But they talk about the fact that the more choices you give, the less likely it is that your person will do it. You actually will usually do better providing them less options. I'm providing you with a number of options here. We're actually sharing this because we've done the research and we wanted to give you a number of different ways to do it. One is to do through the digital distributors. Other is the one middleman method. Then there's the no middleman method where the payment processor maybe is taking a cut for just handling the payment, but then you're handling the rest. These are all possibilities. Absolutely agree with you. Provide them with not just less, but just make it easy. Just buy the song on iTunes here. Google. Sometimes they have a couple icons. People don't get too confused with iTunes, Google Play, Amazon.
We've seen some musicians push the iTunes, make it very easy. You can buy the song on iTunes, but then underneath it say, if you want to support me, I can actually get a bigger cut if you go through Bandcamp or through one of those things, just so that option is there for the musician, for the fan to actually have that choice. And they found that the fans who actually want to support will actually go through the hoops, where they might actually already have an account at Bandcamp or one of those other stores. So that's another thing that you can do. You have that buy for iTunes, but then, well, hey, you can also do this.
It's a very good question. And generally when it comes to marketing, and we're going to talk about marketing the next day or so, it's about limiting choices and making it simple for people. Generally your messages, I'll just give a hint of what's coming. Your marketing messages should try and get them to take one action, and should always be focused on getting them to take an action. It should be as simple as possible. The time they spend reading your messages is time they could be doing the thing you want them to do. And so everyone makes the mistake, I'll explain every reason why you should ever buy my music. And by the time they get to page 3, they're not buying your music. So you don't want to be there. Speaking of marketing your music, let's talk about marketing within the store itself. I've already been going into this a little bit. More text isn't better. What really helps is that they want objective proof that your music's any good if they've never heard of you before. They might have heard of you, and that's cool. If they do, they're more likely to do it. But even major artists have to constantly remind people, here's who I am and everything else. What is objective quote? What if objective proof is quotes? It's quotes from reviewers, from any awards that you've done, any high-profile play. This is played on NPR. That's what we do for our Shamrock album. It's like this one was played on NPR. Well, hopefully by that point you hear that, you're like, oh, well then maybe I'll at least check it out. And then from there they do the song sample, and next to the song sample should be a little buy button. That's how this chain works. So this is why that first review, or that something that stands out that provides objective proof that it's a good piece of music that other people like, is key. It's critical to it. If you don't have that to start, we're going to be talking about how to get your first reviews on day 3 at some point. We're going to be talking about PR and some of that kind of stuff. But among the options you have, you can actually pay to get your first review. Now, while that may sound dishonest, there are some places that you pay them only to do a review, not the results of the review. So it gets you started in order to get more reviews from there. That's one way to do it. Another way is to use MP3 blogs. And we're going to talk about that next session. I want to leave that aside for the moment. The other thing you can do is to mention famous bands that sound like yours so that your music comes up on searches for their music. Right? So like the number one thing people are going to search on when they go to these music stores, it's probably, unless they know who you are and you're doing really well, that's great, that's fantastic. The questions that we normally get is, well, how do I even get noticed? They've done the marketing. Everyone's heard of that band, they might not have heard of you. Well, use that band. You should sound similar. I mean, don't put in some random band you don't sound like. But you should try to match it up. And then once you're in the store, if you sell your stuff yourself, well, definitely offer samples. I mean, people always want to try before they buy when it comes to music. They're like, you just don't want to be buy this song. It sounds really good, right? Probably not going to work too well. The other is you link to your site from your site. You want that whole tie-in to the rest of your social presences so that you can just establish yourself as a more complete entity. And then there's the thing I mentioned before the break. The number one way to kickstart your sales. This might surprise you a bit, or maybe not. We'll see. Digital music stores, if you think about how customers actually use it, are driven by searches, right? That's how it works. I mean, they may have a front page with a handful of stuff, but most of the activity is in that little search bar in the corner. So how do you come up in searches if they haven't heard of you yet? And it's very simple. You make a cover song. The cover song will come up when they search on the famous cover. If they like your music, then they'll actually check out the rest of your stuff. And they've actually already shown through the statistics that they get out of it that the albums with cover songs sell a lot better than the ones without any. And furthermore, the ones with cover songs also, people tend to buy whole albums, not just single tracks. So it's actually a really good enticement. And so the best marketing you can do is not exactly marketing, is it? It's back in the studio, back when you're making your album, you put a cover song on your album. And yes, you have to clear the rights, which is not something, I mean, we mentioned this, we didn't talk about how to clear rights. If you're interested, we have time at the end, we'll be happy to talk about it. But I just want to press forward with what we're talking about right now. But does that make sense? Now you're thinking more like a fan. Now you're thinking, how do I get in front of my audience in a way that will actually make it so they'll interact with my music? That's how you do it. So, we live in a very interesting time now when it comes to music, because the music has been freed from the physical objects that it used to be on, right? I always like the Star Wars quote, luminous beings are we, not this crude matter. That's all it is, right? It's this luminous stuff.
I just like that quote.
I do like that quote. I've used it many times. And then that said, if I have music and I want to sell it to Jason and we're in person because I'm at a show, how can I hand him digital bits? I mean, luminous stuff. It's just like, doesn't work unless there's this like force thing that I haven't mastered yet. But how do you make this happen, right? And you still need to basically be able to actually hand people music and have them pay you. We're going to cover that here. CDs are still an option. So download cards are a slightly newer option. They cost a lot less to make. USB drives, LPs, I'm going to go through each of these because they are worth the time. We are not yet in an age fully where you could just shake somebody's hand and transfer data as it is in some sci-fi books. Be nice. So the question becomes, how do you know how many CDs to make? We'll break it down. This is what we suggest. Think about determining what you need for your press campaign, your radio campaign, your promotional copies that you're going to give away when you walk up to somebody, and if you're doing personal networking, maybe you can mail them a song, but maybe you just want to hand them a CD so they've got something to work with. So free copies that you're going to hand away, copies for sale, all of these things will be the case. Once you do that, there's 4 manufacturing options really that you have. More than most people think. Of course, you can make it yourself on your computer. You can purchase a bulk duplication machine. These actually are available, and they're cheaper than you think if you're going to be making a lot of them. You're doing a lot of touring. You could use a duplication house, but you could also use this to make one-offs a lot. Like small groups of copies. Use a CD printing house or print on demand. We're going to talk about 3 and 4. We're going to kind of skip 1 and 2. Figure you already know how to make it on your computer. We do have some methods in the book about talking about how to make it look good. Like there's label printing options that make it so you don't put your little marker and just say, here's my album, and it's got like that pretty cheap look on it. But there's other, we want to skip to 3 and 4. What you may not have run into if you haven't done a duplication run yet is that there are different options depending on how many you make. Duplication and replication are distinct terms, and they actually mean different things as far as what you get. A duplication is 500 copies or less, generally. Replication, Glassmaster, more than 500. Duplicated CDs are both more expensive per CD copy. They cost more per item. But even worse, they don't last very long. They're kind of cheap. They may, now given a lot of people consider the plastic to be disposable anyway. They want to rip it and then get rid of it. And in that case, it may work out nowadays. But if you want a more permanent item, Glassmaster CDs are good. Keep in mind that CDRs even start to fail if they just have them sitting in boxes. They'll start to degrade. So that is something that is a consideration as you're doing this. You create an inventory through these types of places. Disc Makers, Disc Factory, NW Media. These are all good ones. We've used all 3 amongst our 19 albums that we've done. We haven't duplicated huge runs of all of them because we went through basically this, and we determined, okay, we don't need it for this one, we need it for that one. We made our choices. And, then we made a run. The nice thing about this, of course, is they make excellent giveaways. There's all kinds of marketing options you can do. Moving on. Print on demand. Print on demand is a very exciting new way to actually get your music out there without having to put any money up front. You upload the art, you upload the music. And then, it costs nothing to do this. There's no initiation fees. And they handle the sales, they handle the credit card transaction, and they handle what's called fulfillment. And what fulfillment is, it's a term you're going to have to get familiar with, and we're going to be mentioning it quite a bit throughout this course, is actually packing it up and shipping it to the customer. It's a pain. I mean, you don't want to be doing this. But if you don't have a fulfillment option, you actually have to do that. I mean, how else are you going to take physical CD sales? The cool thing is they manufacture it on the spot based on what they do. So it's a really cool option. There's also some other advantages to it. First of all, you can use it to create small runs of professional-looking CDs. Not the type that would come out of your computer, but something that would actually look really good. And you can use it like if there are still a few places that say we want a CD. And they do that because they want to raise the bar a little bit and not just have people emailing the music or doing something like that. I believe Pandora is one of them. Pandora will also, if you recall from earlier ones, want you to have a barcode. Well, having a CD print on demand is a way for you to do a good-looking CD because they actually evaluate it when it comes in, and if you just have a hand-printed one, it's a little less likely they'll pick it up. You've got that. And the other key is you can always keep your albums in print. Nothing ever has to go out of print in terms of CDs. But when it comes to CDs, these are not the only options. This is another thing people forget. Nowadays, you need the music to actually work out really well for you and do more. You have to go beyond the standard product. There are hybrid CDs that you can use and sell. And this has not just music on it, it also has data on it. So you could sell videos, you could sell extras, you could sell a PDF book of the making of. You can have all kinds of options in that digital space and allow you to actually make a better product, which makes it more likely, oh, well, why shouldn't I just buy it on iTunes? Well, if you buy it here at my show, you'll get this extra stuff. And it gives you a new option. And so we're always looking for that kind of angle as we're talking about making money with music, monetizing this stuff, marketing this stuff is going beyond and giving them something extra that compels them to make the sale at the time where you're in front of them. Make sense?
Like a short documentary or something.
Sure. That's a great idea. And that kind of making of, we highly recommend while you're making your album or while you're doing whatever project it is you're doing, just grab somebody with a phone to just take these little snippet videos. Grab an editor. There's editors on almost every major platform that are free. Edit it together and make a little documentary out of it. And now you've got some extra material that people might be interested in. It's a great idea. And let's go beyond. Let's give you even more options to try and get that sale to happen if you do have CDs or some physical items like that. The case can be more than just a regular case. I mean, you can easily do a DVD-style case, which actually there's something about them. They feel more substantial than a regular CD case. But we found a lot of places online that actually have interesting style CD cases. Like the trigger pad has this little spring-loaded thing that kind of spits it out and grabs it back in. It's like this arm thing. There's others as well, custom cases, that have interesting looks and feels to them. And the nice thing about them is there's no reason why you have to make 1,000 of them. If you want to make it truly interesting and you want to make a real chance that you'll make that sale at the time, is that you make a limited number and you say, I'm only making 20 of these. This is all I'm ever going to make. And they cost $30 each, but these are all that there are. Well, suddenly you're making it much more likely that you're going to make that sale. And going above and beyond, I mean, if you just make 30 CDs, it's a little less likely than if you make 30 custom case CDs. See what I'm talking about? That's how this comes together. Now, let's just say you have a bunch of CDs. You've got some for your sales at shows and in-person types of events. But then you also want to sell them online. Fortunately, there's a lot of options for this kind of thing. CD Baby and Nimbit are some of the better ones that we like. We've used CD Baby quite a bit. They have an inventory of your CDs. They will handle the sales and they will handle the fulfillment. So they're excellent. Shipping is handled by the customer. So, except for the shipping of you to CD Baby. And that's got to be figured into your costs. We're just going to tell you that now. The nice thing about CD Baby is it makes your inventory available to stores. So, you know, if you walk into Walmart and look for Big Turtle, our album, they should be able to search on it and find it and say, well, we don't have it in stock, but we can have it here in a few days. So it's actually a really nice option. Download cards are another way to do it. So now, what's music anymore if it's just a bunch of digital bits? The only thing I need to really sell in person is access to it. That's really what you're doing. So what you would like to be able to do is hand somebody something that represents your music so they hand you money and they feel they're getting something substantial out of it. They're not quite as popular as some of the other methods that we're about to talk about in a few minutes, but still it works out really well because download cards are very inexpensive to make, much less expensive than CDs. To you, by the way. To the customer, naturally you can sell it for any amount that you would like. But they work out pretty well. Disc makers can do it, or you can make your own with Cash Music, which also handles the downloads. And you'll be handling the payments, of course, on your own. And finally, USB drives. Now, the cool thing about that is, not only is it an item that's useful to the person making the purchase after you've sold it, but they make it in the craziest shapes you've ever seen. So I've seen one shaped like, actually, not just shaped like, but actual lighters that has a little thing based in it. I saw one that's like a transformer robot that like transform into whatever you want. And
they will actually work with you if you've got a little bit more money and you really want to make an interesting option. You might have some funding for this. You can actually have them make any custom shape you want. It's plastic after all. And again, now you can make a very cool custom thing. You can say there's only 30 of these Transformer Robot albums that I have, and the rest are the little standard albums, and the Transformer Robot costs, like $40, and then this regular one is just the standard 15. You can actually do pretty well on that kind of thing. Now, they cost more, of course, as items, so you have to figure that out. But these are options that take you far beyond what you would normally do. It makes it more exciting when you're playing live, or you're doing whatever you're doing in person.
There's an example we can use, and what we talk about here is, I don't know if you've heard of the band I Fight Dragons, they're out of Chicago. But they actually used the USB drives, and they added the limited quantity piece of it as well to make it a unique sale, where they offered 100, they only made 100 USBs, and they said if you buy this, you get this content, plus you get this lifetime membership to that you can attend any one of our shows going forward, and I think all feature content or something like that. So they sold each one of those USB drives for $100.
$10,000.
Yes. And they sold out. And it was a limited quantity, so people were excited to, oh, this is perfect. I'll just buy it now. So anyway, that's a good example of...
and a key marketing technique.
Yes.
Limiting the quantity. And if you want to make these, you can go to disc makers. Some of the more interesting ones, premium USB, custom USB, but then just search on custom USB drives. Generally, you'll be paying, I've been trying to find like the cheapest ones I can, because the truth is, when it comes to just selling your MP3s, you don't need a ton of storage. A gig is probably too much. You can find some of the smallest drives they have, but I've never gotten it much below like $3, $4, which is, that's about what you're going to, it's probably a little more than you would pay for a duplicated set of CDs. Remember, duplication, replication? Replication, less per CD, but you have to make a lot of them. Duplication, it actually comes out to around $3 per CD now. Prices change constantly, so by the time you guys might, even online, might be searching on it and saying, wait a minute, it's actually this much. You have to check when you're doing the business, when you're making the decision to actually commit the money to it. Keep searching, because I think, is what I want to do for the next time that we do another live run. I want to start using USB drives, because they're more useful later, and you can provide more content on it, and it's probably the most flexible in terms of the types of items you can sell. I want to buy like groups of different shapes and say there's only 20 of these. Start using the I Fight Dragons over and over again. And finally, LPs are getting popular, especially with EDM music, like electronic music, but lots of other options here. These are great collector's items, and the people who have the means to play these things love getting the actual LPs. So you've got a ready market. It's small, but they're very committed, and they love it. If you want to do that, these are a handful of places you can go to do it. But there's more. I mean, obviously, we always give you just a few that can solve the problem. The other great thing about it is that the album art is not just a tiny little thumbnail on some website, nor is it even this thing on the CDs, which I remember when they came out, they were decrying, well, the album art's so small now. You've got the album art on this big thing. You can really do something with the art as it relates to this. Right? I don't know if you recall some of those. You might have tuned in, but we talked about from our very first session the fact that sometimes the artists that you use can have a following of their own, that actually their following is so interested they might buy the music just because they want the art and they're trying to collect everything from it. So all this stuff comes together very nicely in these physical products, which you might have thought were dead before we started to talk about it now and what we're doing. That is what I wanted to talk about, however, as it relates to physical music. So I just wanted to pause for a second, see if there was any interest in talking, any questions anywhere. Otherwise, we can move on.
I was thinking about how you're pointing out, like how as I'm understanding it, that our similarities to other genres mainstay of our advantage in getting getting heard and getting out there.
Yes.
And it sounds like what you're saying is that's not gonna take away from an artist's uniqueness. It's actually gonna
yes.
free them up. And I just wonder if you could
what you're saying is a very good point that we hear quite a bit. You're like, I want to be known for my own stuff. But here's the thing. Until your name has earned the way to become associated with the style of music, which takes a lot, you need to borrow from other people to establish yourself first. Even the well-known artists that you know now, if you look back in their history, they do the same thing. They tie themselves to bands that sound sort of similar until you realize that they're their own thing and their name is associated with the sound.
Yeah.
That's how it works. There's another thing, we're going to talk about this in the marketing part, but it's a concept that we like to call piggybacking, and they've already spent the marketing budget. They've spent quite a few millions in a lot of cases. Why not just ride that? Right? Once you get picked up, you get to be evaluated on your own merits once they hear your music. The only thing you're trying to do is actually to get in front of new fans, to try and get picked up. Now, we're talking about marketing inside of a store, which is not the way most people think, ironically. This is why we bring it up here. This is why we focus on it. Because the next session, we talk about how to market yourself to the broader world. And the same thing still holds to some extent, also within your genre. And when it comes to marketing, there's a whole other set of things you can do. I can talk about one that I don't believe we have in our slides, but it's worth mentioning at this point. I'm going to say this right now, and I'll probably bring it up again at that point. Find artists that sound like you, who are both the big artist in your genre, and find another one who's just slightly ahead of where you are, who's like a little established in your city and known. And why am I saying that? Well, what you do is you enter that in something like Google Alerts or Mention. If you've ever used Mention.net, I believe it is.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure it's Mention.net. And then you put your name in those things so that you come up every time your name comes up or is mentioned anywhere. But then you also put these big artists and the artists that you're close to. Why? Because everywhere they mention the artist that's in your zone, but ahead of you, you see that they were covered in some magazine or some website. Guess what they might be interested in? It's your same genre. And you just keep tailing, and everywhere that they are, you just try and get yourself, and you get to catch up. Yeah. It's one of the key tips we have in the class in Chicago that we teach on social media, and we're not teaching that here, so I can just give that one. I can just share it right now. Was there any other questions about the physical sales?
Not about the physical sales. We did have one that came in on digital distribution, if you want to touch on that one now.
Sure.
This is from Denver, and they wanted to know about the connection between iTunes sales and digital sales in general and SoundScan. So if you're selling to these digital platforms, are you still registering in SoundScan? Can you still rise in the charts if that's your primary mode of distribution?
That is an excellent question. We covered that a bit in the last session, actually. And iTunes does report to SoundScan, but then your album needs to be registered in SoundScan to do it. You still need the barcode, even though you're selling on the digital music platforms. So, this is the kind of thing where you still have to do what we talked about last session, which is preparing your music. Now, some of the methods that we covered here, especially selling your own downloads, that's not tracked in SoundScan. Some of the other ones where you get down to one middleman may or may not report to SoundScan, and that's where you need to do your research. That's a very good question. Okay, moving on. Ringtones. It's another way you can sell your music. Now we're talking about all the different things you can do with that same piece of music and keep selling it all these different ways. Get royalties off of it all these different ways. Get licensing off of it. And I'll talk about the distinction between those in a minute. With ringtones, it's fairly straightforward. TuneCore or Mixer are both good ways to do it. And they'll get you on the platforms and allow you to basically turn your music into ringtones. But keep in mind that carrier fees take a big cut, and you might not make a large percentage off of this, but it's a nice thing to offer your fans because for the most part, the same digital distributors that you normally use for your music, like a TuneCore, will also handle it. Or working through Mixer is actually quite interesting because it has a lot of other options that we like quite a bit, and we'll talk about that a little later. They'll come up again. The thing is, once it's in there, don't assume that your fans just know about it. Just promote it. It's like, hey, now you can get ringtones for this. And you should mention the songs in particular they can get out of it, not just, hey, my music. Because it makes the trigger, oh, I'd love to have that song as a ringtone. The more specific you can be when you're marketing, generally the better off you are. So, now we're going to talk about how to drive royalty and licensing income. Now, royalties are what you get when your music is played. Licenses are what you get when somebody wants to use your music in their work, or in their work that would be like in, for example, video or film, sync rights, that kind of stuff. Or maybe they just want to use your work as part of some other thing. There's a lot of possibilities with it. There's actually endless ways to do both of them. When it comes to royalties, the easiest way to get the income off of it is to generate plays of your music. And we're going to cover that the entire next session. In fact, we're going to have 16 categories, not 16 separate places, 16 categories of places where you can get your music played. Many of them generate royalties. And the whole point of that is to just get your music out there and also promote you. So it's excellent from both standpoints. So let's talk about musical licensing, which is something that we can get into a little more. You can, number one, submit to music licensing listings. Taxi is a big example of this, but by far not the only one. There's other places where they have listings. There's also get hired as sort of a work for hire to create music for a licensing company. So if you're a big songwriter and recording music and you don't mind that you won't be making any more than the flat rate they're going to pay you to make the music, this might be a good way to go for you. It's yet another option. Generally, work for hire is the kind of thing that you want to be sure that you're doing it. Because by doing that, you're saying, I don't own this anymore. I'm not going to get any more royalties. I'm not going to get any more. I don't have any more ownership rights over it. But then again, you might be a kind of a composer for hire. You might be a composer for, whatever people ask you to do. It can work out really well. Also, you could join a music library like Magnatune, which licenses through all kinds of other options. Mood mixes, iLicense music. If they have to choose you, and then it's a 50-50 split with no other performance royalties. So they cut off the performance royalties. So what does this tell you? Remember what we said at the very, very beginning, where there's the customer, the middleman, and you? That middleman matters a lot. Once you start to go with it, you may be cutting off an entire source of revenue for your music by doing it. This is not the only option at all for this kind of stuff. Here's why they exist. I want you to think about something for a second. Put yourself in the head of somebody who's a music supervisor. Music supervisors choose music for music projects, like video and things like that. A music supervisor is looking for music that fits the exact thing they're trying to do. They're like, ugh, I've got a chase scene. I need music that's perfect for the chase scene, right? So what do they want? You can't just say that on the phone and expect somebody to give you the thing. You want a huge library of music and listen. Ah, that's the one I want. I want that one. Think of it like clip art sites for musicians. That's what they're looking for. That's what sites like Magnatune do. And others that are in that zone. That's where they sit. There's another zone that people talk about an awful lot, which is, of course, making music for video games, licensing music. Certainly, as a medium, it's something that requires music. Whatever they do, whatever they're trying to do within it, it needs music usually in the background. They usually need a lot of songs, like little tiny bits that might be equivalent to bumpers, really, on video stems. But then the other thing that they need is a lot of audio sounds and various, it's called sound design, can add audio design, you need a lot of things that just actually create a mood. And depending on what kind of studio you have, you can put this together. It's a little harder to make the connection to the big studios. The big studios are kind of just as locked up as a big TV studio now because there's a lot of money associated with it. There's a lot of people who pay a lot of money in order to make that connection and to lock everybody else out. So I've known more than a few people in this industry. And the interesting thing is they tend to work with just some music designers and music composers that they know and like and work with, and they just work with them from then on. That said, there's always ways to break in if you know somebody in the industry. And by the way, that's true of all these other licensing options. We were giving you ones that are links. You can always get to know people in these industries and just make it happen. It's just not really easy for us to stand up here and say, get to know people. We want to give you like practical, down-to-earth things. That said, the Game Developers Conference, if you were to go out there as a music designer or musician that composes this kind of stuff, everybody walking around this conference is in the game industry. Most of them are not musicians. They're looking for music, and they may not even know that they're looking for music at the time. So you can offer terms that are maybe a little lower, or maybe you can actually catch some when they're new and young and starting out and give them a deal, and then when they grow up and get bigger, you can actually be able to do more business with them. This has a lot to do with what we talked about in the very first session today. You get to know them before they're famous. It's also about getting to meet the people in the industry and doing networking in places where you're the only musician compared to doing networking where it's just a music conference. Now, if there was only one video game designer at a music conference, they could make a lot of connections there. It's a really good place for them to go. There's also sites like Game Dev. So as you can imagine, there's conventions, but then there's also online congregations. Game Dev, now I want you to do the same thing I talked about earlier. I said put yourself in the head of a supervisor. Now put yourself in the head of a game designer. I know how to do programming. I have an idea for a game. I actually may not even be a great artist, so I'm looking for clip art and little sprites that I can actually manipulate, move around, of all kinds of different shapes to represent what I'm doing. Maybe somebody can help me design backgrounds or images. So, here's another question. On the flip side of the whole clearing music rights, which we briefly alluded to in the early part of this, which, like I said, we can get to that answer, how do you clear other people's music? Here's the other side of the game, though. You have written a song, and then somebody covers it. How do you get paid? Well, this is called mechanical royalties, and it's actually set by statute to be 0.091 cents per copy. That copy is a copy. Doesn't mean that they sold it. It doesn't even mean that they intend to ever sell it. If they make 1,000 copies and give it away, you're entitled to 0.091 cents per copy. Under 5 minutes and over 5 minutes, it goes to. And the rates are listed online. We have links to it from Nancy Rodman. Don't want to get too caught in these details. I'm always worried about this because these holes go pretty deep. But you can override this. You can actually allow somebody to let them cover your music for less than that rate. You can't really get somebody to pay more because they're not required by law to ever do so. If they want to cover your music, and you can't tell them no, by the way. If you hate somebody and then they cover your music, at least you can make them pay the maximum rate. You can't say no. Yes, that's right. You can change it.
Well, yeah. Your GMs, musicians, but they have more work, so they can actually say that I don't want to be associated with that and stop it. But in the US, you can't.
So, considering handle your own